And we're back.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And I'm
joined by a guest co-host today. Go ahead, Alex.
And I'm Alexander Agunas, the everyman gamer who jumped the gun.
Oh,
I'm sorry. It's one of those, we don't have a standard format for guest co-hosts. Like, if you were a guest, you definitely wait until we were introduced, but as a guest co-host, you just act like a regular co-host.
I don't know. That's your call, man. This is your show. I'm just crashing it.
It's like Trample acts as overrun. Guest host acts as host.
Dude, is Trample still in Pathfinder 2e? Like, is that a thing still?
I don't know, but if it is, I don't think it ever worked like Overrun.
Oh gosh, no.
So we are continuing last episode, our special episode, where we were talking about 2nd edition of Pathfinder. This was the big news that was announced that I am positive everyone that's listening has at least heard it's happening, and is probably well caught up on a lot of the news. I don't think anyone is caught up on all the news.
I mean, I'm basically have been trying to do that nonstop, and it is just so much info. Even basically trying to follow it all is impossible. I mean, I even have my little robot internet spies out there collecting every single word a Paizo employee utters, and I still can't keep up with it.
And, like, it seems like every day Paizo is putting out a new blog that gives us even more information. Like, today, the Pathfinder Society 2e blog post went up that I'm sure we'll talk about in the shout-out section later.
So before we talk about the specifics that all of these interesting things we're talking about, we haven't really had a chance to share our thoughts on any of this. We've mostly just been reacting to what was said in interviews and collecting and sharing the news. So now, today we get to talk about our feelings. And I'd like to start by just talking about non-specific to what we do know about 2nd edition Pathfinder, just broadly. There is a 2nd edition of Pathfinder coming out. How do you feel about that? Alex, why don't you start?
It has the playtest has the coolest logo I've ever seen. Like, oh my gosh, that book has no right to be as beautiful as it is. Like, I feel like I ended the last podcast gushing about it, and I'm going to start this one. It is phenomenal. Like, as a publisher, like, I look at that and I'm like, that's a mighty fine logo you got there, Paizo. And going off of that, I kind of have different feelings about 2nd E based on, like, which hat I'm wearing. Whenever Owen's on, he talks about how, like, oh, I have my Paizo developer hat. I have my Rogue Genius Games hat. So, like, I have a gamer hat, I have a publisher hat, and I have a freelancer hat. And I guess I have a blogger hat, too.
I just have
the blogger
the best hat.
I mean, you have one hat that encompasses them all. You've got, like, the hat of Sauron. But, so, like, as a gamer, everything I've heard about it so far, I mostly like. There's one exception that we're not talking about today.
Like, yeah. Hold on, but we're not talking about what we know about 2nd edition. We're just talking about a 2nd edition. Is this now a time for a 2nd edition?
This is good. This is good for it. I have been in camp. There is probably going to be one coming for about, I'd say, a year and a half now. I'm definitely behind other people in the network, but I was ready for it as a gamer. As a publisher, it's sad to see the thing that you've been using to, make money go. But man, oh man, Starfinder was great for bumping up Everyman Gaming sales. So, like, I'm guessing Pathfinder 2e is going to be pretty good too. And as a blogger, maybe I'll get out of my rut and finally get some more interesting stuff to write about. So I'm overall excited. Cautiously excited, I think, is a good word for it.
If you're in a rut, you didn't tell the rest of us about it, because I've enjoyed a lot of the last couple of months of content, especially your your freelancer guide from a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, I like that one. You know what? A rut for me isn't like I can't do it anymore. It's pulling the water out of the well is just harder because the well is smaller.
All right, well put. Param, 2nd edition of Pathfinder. How does it hit you?
I think my feelings are very complex. At first, I was super concerned with how it would turn out, especially when I saw how radical it was going to be. Because, I mean, I knew it was coming. I knew it was about time. They changed their language a couple of years ago when they started talking about it, and it was obvious they were working on it. But I expected something that would be inherently backwards compatible based off of the unique challenges that a Pathfinder 2.0 faces that no other game is going to face. But the more I've learned about it, the less my caution, the less cautious I felt, and the more excited I'm getting. As some of the explanations, especially our own episode did a lot of that because they were so open last episode. By the way, if you've just tuned in and you decided for some reason to skip last episode, go back. It's an important one.
Yeah, it's okay. Just throw your viewership on the pile. We'll count it later.
Yes, we respect every member of our viewers and listeners.
I do, but there's like 7,000 of them.
There's a lot more than that. That's just the YouTubers
I was
on
just
this
talking
one.
about on the YouTube views.
Yeah, holy crap.
That's the only data metric I have access to. I can look at the YouTube video.
Oh man, our YouTube numbers are usually insignificant, and then just to see, holy crap, how many people have jumped on that YouTube video, and then me going over and looking at our traffic on the rest of the thing, and just basically after all that stuff aired, you could just if you've ever seen Looney Tunes where the wolf's eyes stick out of his eye sockets 20 feet, and the jaw drops and the tongue rolls across. I'm like, viewers, whoa.
What Param is trying to say is that we at No Direction Network love and appreciate all of the support our amazing fans give us.
Yes.
So I am very much in the same boat as you, Alex, in that there's a lot of different ways I'm viewing second edition, because, as just a gamer who owns X amount of money worth of Pathfinder products, finding out we've got a second edition coming, I wouldn't want that second edition to be reverse compatible for its sake. But as the person who would really like my books to stay valid, and for, upon the launch of 2E to be able to play any of those classes that I've come to think of as Pathfinder classes, I'm going to miss that. And I don't know how long it's going to be before it starts to feel like Pathfinder again, because Pathfinder didn't even feel like Pathfinder for a year.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's why I think that it's hard on the team, but I really think that year one is going to be a year of let's reestablish what the game is and then add more new stuff there. Or at least I think that would be strong, but we can go talk more about that when we get to the predictions part of this episode.
Yeah.
So any other broad thoughts about Pathfinder 2nd Edition before we talk about some of the specific things that have been announced and how we feel about them?
Broad feelings. The website design makes sense. Now that the redesign makes sense, now that we have everything. That was a very interesting herald to the oncoming playtest. Gosh, there was one thing. Oh, I still can't believe that they unleashed the playtest in a random Tuesday in March. That will never stop surprising.
This close to PaizoCon. I'm so surprised it hit. I guess my final thing is I am really surprised that they are going as different from the sacred cows of the 3.5 era as they're going.
Yeah, and they're even going away from some of the ones they kept in Starfinder, which literally came out around the corner ago.
So to you both, well, okay, to all of us, it seems like a random Tuesday. But from an industry perspective, it's right before Gamma, which is a major trade show, which is when you are talking to stores and buyers and distributors. So getting something for buyers to be encouraged about, because we're the end buyers, but before we buy it from Paizo or from a game store, a distributor has to buy it from Paizo, and Paizo has to know how much of this stuff they need to order. So it's not as random of a Tuesday as it may have appeared.
Can I put my game store owner hat on for a second?
Go ahead.
Okay, so as somebody who has run game stores, a very successful one amongst competition, I can tell you that a new edition of a game, no matter how that edition turns out, means a big bump in sales, just straight up, at least until everybody's played it and figured out what it means. Now, of course, that could go south afterwards, but that initial order, I mean, if you're a game store owner, you should just be loving this news, period, because you're just going to be able to sell so many of that initial launch product.
Yeah.
And also the fact, they put the horses in front of the cart very appropriately here. So the new website design, like Alex said, but also we knew about Planar Handbook, and it's not yet time for them to announce what would have been the Gen Con hardcover. And so it's not like there's a whole bunch of books that were announced that as soon as second edition was announced was invalidated. But they also didn't wait so long to announce the book for Gen Con that people weren't starting to be suspicious that maybe we're not getting it or maybe something different is coming. Like there's a lot of ways that the timing for this really worked. And just like the fact that they had so much information ready to go right out of the gate and they've been parsing it out so consistently.
Yeah.
I feel like I could play Pathfinder 2nd Edition today, or at least the playtest version.
Yeah, I agree. Also, in chat, our friends at Roll for Combat mentioned that they had to do it for Gamma, and it just, at least for me, I never really paid attention to Gamma because usually whenever they introduce something to their investors, they had already told us about it, which they technically did for Pathfinder playtest too. They told us about the playtest before they presented it at Gamma. It's just that Gamma has never really been anything that was like super important as a consumer. Like as a store owner, yes, very important. But as like for us, like just walking into a game store and buying stuff, it's like, nah, it's a thing. So
that's so the technical term, it's industry facing instead of consumer facing.
I like that term. Let's go with it.
And honestly, again, to put my store
I didn't make it up. That's the real term.
And to lead off to something that Alex said, and putting my store owner hat back on, usually when the Gamma news, I was usually excited mostly for the board gaming side of the fence. And usually RPG news came out of Gen Con.
Indeed.
Yeah, Gen Con, PaizoCon was good for announcements. For a while, they were trying to time that March release for PaizoCon, but it wasn't quite working. And honestly, PaizoCon is great for Pathfinder fans, but it was not like a sales driving thing that they needed to stress themselves out to hit that mark. So,
well, it says everything it says everything that Pathfinder 2 is launching at Gen Con, not PaizoCon.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was just saying, as far as information, you know what? What I was saying was irrelevant. Let's move on. So we know a lot about second edition. Like we were saying, it's hard to just aggregate all this information. So we're not going to be covering that. We've covered a good chunk of it on the website. We try and update people regularly, but I think the main place to go for information is the Paizo website. So
totally,
we don't like just being an echo stream for the Paizo blog. So instead of posting every time they post new information, we're just going to recommend people check that out. Check us out for feelings and interpretations of it.
And EN World has a pretty good compilation page on their threads too that they've got. So there's tons of places you can get the info from.
Also,
and if you join our Discord chat,
that
is, there's a steady stream of people finding that information, sharing it, and then talking about it.
Yeah, huge shout outs for the Joker Plays, Lone Dwarf, and Randall in our Discord chat for doing some amazing base level journalism work and getting all of this stuff gathered up, especially going through the Glass Cannon podcast playtest recordings and just extracting all the rules goodness out there with timestamps.
Yep, because all the playtests have been really interesting, and they often take the time to explain changes, but they often also power through many of them. So it's important that somebody else is analyzing it, such as Randall's been doing at Joker Plays and Lone Dwarf, like you said.
Yeah, there's one point where they go, thieving, it's a skill. And then it's that's a big deal. And now they're 50 feet away already. They're doing the next thing.
So like I said, we are a great center for news, but we are also a great center for interpretations, feelings, and just kind of a finger on the pulse. So that's the main crux of what we're going to be talking about today. Things we've heard about that have us excited, concerned, and curious about. I'm saying the second edition of Pathfinder, but it's also very important to know that we don't know anything about the second edition of Pathfinder. We know about the playtest for the second edition of Pathfinder. Anything that has been announced could change by the time second edition comes out. It's just a good indicator of the direction that things are going, and many of these things likely will make it in a similar state. Some of them may even make it unchanged, but some of these things may be completely scrapped. And if it sounds like Paizo is speaking with confidence about things that are going to be in the playtest, it's not because they're saying this is set in stone for second edition and the playtest doesn't matter. It's them saying we know what's going to be in the playtest.
Right.
Yes.
Now, it's also worth remembering that the beta playtest for Pathfinder 1 was took a lot more risks than what eventually became Pathfinder 1. So I don't know if that's a pattern they'll follow, but if history has shown us through the playtest, they often propose more wild than they eventually adopt.
And I'm pretty sure that's what Logan said when he was on with Eric last time we had an episode.
I remember Eric saying it, but anyway, it was definitely said last episode that they're swinging for the fences now, and there may be somewhere like a middle ground option is what might eventually make it into second edition.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like the two things are completely unrelated. What their plans are for second edition is what they're going to propose. It's not like second edition is going to end up being a clone of fourth edition or something.
Mm-hmm, totally.
Right. Yeah, and like I'm surprised that the classes that we're getting in the playtest book are the 11 from the core rulebook, but I'm not expecting that to change. Those are going to be most likely the classes we get in second edition's core rulebook, plus the Alchemist, as it's been said. Mm-hmm. I was just surprised.
Oh, and we have a random invasion from everyone's favorite Hobbit.
Yes, the Scarlet random encounter.
Hey, Scarlet.
Oh, gosh.
All right.
All right, so Param, why don't you tell us one of the things you're excited about Pathfinder 2nd Edition?
Okay, so the part that I'm most excited about of all the things I've heard is one of the things that came out with earliest, which is the revised action economy, especially as I'm seeing it in action in the many recorded playtests, both the Glass Cannon episodes plus the actual playtests they're taking around the cons. They did a recording of one with the Games Trade Magazine people last night as a live broadcast, and just seeing how that is making the combats more tactical and interesting, and how I'm perceiving that it might avoid some of the higher level bogged down that high level Pathfinder turns into. I just hope that it works. What my hope is that with the 3 action economy, basically it's been described as you get 3 actions you can take a turn right from level 1 and continue that all the way through level 20, and 1 reaction off of your turn. So you can move, attack, move, attack. I'm hoping that by keeping that steady and some special abilities that they can propose, that it can keep the combat more mobile and hopefully avoid the dreaded 5-foot shuffle combat that Pathfinder basically becomes, especially at higher level, like when you start getting haste or your second and third base attack bonus. Basically the fight happens wherever the primary melee collides, and only the poor rogue is trying to move around to get his backstabs, and that's how combat goes. And I kind of hoping that this keeps some more variety and choices, especially for your melee focused peoples.
Well, one thing you got to figure is that based on the things we've heard so far in the playtest, it sounds like taking a guarded step is a simple action, and so is moving, and so is attacking. Mm-hmm. So in the current game, you can actually like guarded step away from somebody 5 feet so that you're not adjacent to them anymore, then run all the way around them and get back into melee range and then attack them. That is something you cannot do in Pathfinder 1st Edition.
Right.
Like, I think right there, that's going to give greater incentive for mobility, because in Pathfinder it's very much if I move, I'm either getting attacked or I'm only doing a small move. And it appears in 2nd edition you'll be able to make substantial movements with your actions and still get an attack in, or still cast maybe like a really low power spell. And I think that's going to do a lot for making it more attractive to take single attacks, to not sit there and just pound away and hope that you kill the other guy before they kill you.
And there's also things that didn't feel like they deserved to be the type of action they were, like pulling out your potion before you drink it makes drinking a potion a full round action in 1st edition, and that pulling out the potion is just kind of an obnoxious step, and it just feels like it takes up more than it needs to. Opening doors in the middle of combat is a major, like you have to walk up to the door, open it, and just stop, or use your full round to walk through this door. Whereas now, just the idea of these 3 actions that you can use pretty much universally, anything you need to do on your turn, you've got 3 things you can do on your turn. Oh, that feels so refreshing and freeing.
I think James is going to be really frustrated, our Code Switch blogger and Param and my co-host on No Direction Beyond, because one of James's favorite tactics is that whenever we fight somebody and like they're in another room and we're in a room, he will just go up to them and then as a move action shut the door, and then prepares a standard action to shut the door again if somebody opens the door. And so like literally I've sat I've sat with him at combats where he's just locked people out of rooms for like rounds, and it's just because of the way the action economy works and because the door is a 5-foot square and like indented in one. So it sounds like that will not happen in the new edition. You'll be able to want to walk up to a door, open it as a simple action, and then pass through it as like either a move action or a guarded step. So yeah, I'm thinking the tactics and like it's gonna feel more like you're doing stuff, because sometimes moving doesn't feel like you're doing anything, even though you are doing something. But it's kind of more like the perception of I just move my character and that's it. I didn't contribute to the beating of this encounter, which can be very frustrating.
Also frustrating for new players is explaining move actions. Like standard actions, most new players I've talked to get it. It's like it's the main thing you're doing. But moving is like sometimes movement is a move action. Other things you're doing that are about, like standing up is a move action, and you're kind of moving, but does that mean you can't take a 5-foot step? Well, you've taken a move action, but you didn't take your move action to move. So yes, you can take the 5-foot step, which is a move that's not a move action. And
I am so glad that terminology kerfuffle is gone. Like just poof. Like movement and move. It's like there are so many places in the game, like race traits and racial traits, completely different things, almost the same terms. I've actually seen that as many people's, since we're talking about things we like, about things that people are worried about. I've seen people talk about one thing they're worried about is how the word feat is much more streamlined in second edition than it is in prior editions, where in second edition it seems like any type of selectable ability that you get from leveling up is called a feat, whether it's from your class as a class feat, from a skill as a skill feat, as a general feat. It just seems like no matter where it's coming from. Yeah. Did I do something wrong?
No, I said general feat and I saluted. Yeah. It's the How I Met Your Mother joke.
Oh, sorry. That was a good joke, though. I missed that.
I didn't mean to derail you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was like, whoa. And
actually, since I've derailed you, Reynard Wolf in chat is saying that feet equals Smurf.
Oh gosh, what if every time you said the word feet in chat on like April Fool's Day, it changed your icon to like just a random foot of like some piece of art? I think that would be funny. But I don't know what kind of technology needs to go on behind the scenes to make those jokes work.
Now, probably way too much for that specific one.
Now that they're starting to explain the feats a little bit more, especially post this week stuff that's come out since our last episode, with two exceptions, it seems to mostly be business as usual. You've got a bunch of general feats and ancestry feats and things like that, which are just things that would normally be feats anyway, or traits which are half feats, but still those are normal feat things. I mean, you would take a feat that would give you wings. But the two areas
this is just my opinion, but I kind of feel that like the differentiation of feats is something that people are making a big deal out of for no reason. I'm sorry if this is a big issue for you, dear listeners, but just we already do this in first edition. We already have a billion things that call out combat feats, and they have a tag that says combat next to their name. We call out things that do teamwork feats all the time. There's like 3 classes and a gazillion archetypes and class options that call out teamwork feats, and we have a tag next to it. So at least when we had Eric and Logan on, they were talking, oh yeah, things are tagged. I'm like, we're kind of already tagged. Let's just tag more things. Tag all the things. And then I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think it's going to work well, but it looks like Ryan might want to contest me on this.
No, I actually want to add to that. So it's, as a designer, one of the first things I realized is there's not a whole lot of power level difference between a class feature and a feat. And it feels like the class features now have just become class feats. And things like Rogue Talents is just a class feat. And Magus Arcana is a class feat. All these things that are basically the same idea, just with a new specific name tied to each class. Now it's just a class feat.
Yeah, I wholly agree. It is a class selectable.
And that's what I was getting to.
Go ahead,
I said that's what I was getting to, that the only two places that it's different is skill feats and class feats. And with the class feats, that's just the talents. And an idea that is so well loved in the community that there's been an entire successful product line called the Talented Rogue, the Talented Fighter. It's from third-party publishers that people have wanted to adapt that system onto other classes because of how satisfying it is to choose your special abilities from the list. So the fact that they're just being named feats, so you've got fighter feats, rogue feats, and stuff, which are just, these are a section of feats that only your class can choose from. They are specific abilities that are for your class abilities, and you get them on the level you don't get a normal feat. So you will still get your feats at you get a normal feat every odd level, like in Pathfinder currently, and then on your odd levels, instead of just getting random class abilities that have, you know, different structures, you're just going to get to choose a class feat, and that's how you get your special class abilities, and you're going to have some real choices there.
And so honestly, the skill feats are already in the game. They're called skill unlocks. They're in Ultimate Unchained or Pathfinder Unchained. Well, they already exist.
We need to get
so
back
that was
to
one of the things. Is it actually called a skill feat? I thought they've been calling them skill proficiencies.
They're calling them skill feats.
There seems to be some stuff we need to know there, because they've also sort of referenced that besides just leveling up, making your skills better, taking a skill feat as a way to make a skill even higher. So there's still some stuff we need to learn on how the skill feats work that we haven't really seen yet.
So now there's one thing you said, Param, and that is one of my main concerns about skill feats, and that is that you were saying they are class specific. No. I actually hope they're not. I hope they work more like...
Class feats are class specific. Skill feats are something else.
Right. Sorry, I was talking about the class feats. I'm worried that the class feats are class specific. I hope class feats work like spells in first edition, where it's like, this is the thing, these are the list of classes that this is a class feat for, and that way we don't have situations where it's like, this is something that's perfectly valid for fighters or barbarians to take, but we had to arbitrarily choose which of the two classes gets access to this.
Or even worse, I really hope they don't handle it like the kineticist handles talents, where like, flame jet, this lets you propel into the air and fly. Well, telekinesis works the same way. It functions like the flame jet power. So like you have these two powers that are literally functionally identical. The one literally goes and references the other, and it's like, why could you not have just been kinetic propulsion? Like, why? I feel you on that, Ryan.
So yeah, I think class feats in general, that's my major concern for that, and one of my major concerns for second edition, because I like making the characters like builds that are like a little off of expectation, and if I'm told you can't do this thing that's off of expectation because we had to build things so that they fit into expectations, that's going to make building second edition characters a little more bland for me.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a little concerned on fighter feats right now, actually, because I'm hoping that they manage to keep those feats feeling like things that the fighter should have. Like, if they take the idea of weapon specialization, they make it a fighter-only feat, awesome. That's cool. If they take any of those feats that have a fighter level prerequisite and make them a fighter class feat, cool. But, like, as soon as you start getting to things that start feeling like more people should have them and now they're fighter exclusive just so that you can say fighter has their own things, I'm not crazy about that. I'm hoping, like, we don't know much direction about where they're going with the different classes, because obviously there's going to be overlap. Like, in Pathfinder First Edition, Barbarian and Fighter and Paladin and Ranger are all full base attack bonus marshals that kind of overlap in different ways in different areas. So it's kind of something I feel like we need more info on, and I will admit that, like, I'm a little like, oh, how are they going to handle this? Is this going to work on when it comes to class feats?
Well,
now Justin Sluter had an interesting point in chat. He was saying that he hopes that they allow class feats to be taken by other classes just at a higher level, and that kind of reminds me of how style feats work in most style feats, where it's like you either need this base attack bonus or this monk level, making style feats a monk thing but not exclusively a monk thing. Mm-hmm. I would be okay with that too, but I really hope that would be reserved for something like a style feat, where it's like, this is something I definitely associate with one class, but can see other classes using a little more broadly.
And that's how cross-classing worked in 4th edition, actually. You took a series of feats that let you take another class's special abilities.
Mm-hmm. It makes me wonder whether we're going to see like core class features in these classes, or whether everything is just going to be feats. Are we going to like go to the sorcerer and it's just going to be like feat, or like are there unique powers that only sorcerers get that don't need to be selected? Like,
well, we know some of
do
that.
these classes have a backbone?
We do know some of that
Do we?
because clerics very specifically have that special ability to cast heal, and that wasn't mentioned as a class feat.
Interesting.
So,
that makes me excited. I think that if you're going to have a class-based system, the class needs a backbone, and that needs to be something that like members of this class just do because they're members of the class, and it's not swappable.
I think that I think most things will be class feats, but there will be a few very specific class abilities that just everything gets. I mean, that's how spellcasting is going to have to work for spellcasters.
Yeah, and it's like if Barbarian doesn't have Rage, then what's the difference between a Barbarian and a Ranger before they start taking their feats?
Right. I agree with that too.
Also, you don't get your first
Zerg99 in chat says something I agree with. We need... Sorry, say it again?
Oh, you don't get your first class feat till second level anyway, so your first level characters have to be able to do something.
True.
Yeah. They have to feel like the class you've taken, hopefully. ZergTitan99 in chat is saying that we need the feat and skills blogs. Those are the ones I'm looking forward to the most, especially feats. As someone who mainly played martial characters in first edition, feats is my thing. Like, I think of feats as more core to Pathfinder than spells. I know it's not, but just as far as the options that I swim in, feats is my pool.
Yeah. Another thing, talking about class feats, one thing that Zergedian99 just brought up in chat as well, one of the developers, I think it was Mark Seifter, mentioned that in second edition, your capstone is not set in stone. Like, it's a thing you choose, kind of like how The Alchemist has like a choice of 3 grand discoveries. Apparently, everybody is going to have different capstones. And if I remember the blog post correctly, he specifically cited the Kineticist, where the whole class lets you be single element, and then you get like your capstone, which is all of a sudden I can take other elements' powers, even though I've been a fire person my whole career.
Do you think people are going to see a lot of capstones in second edition?
I hope so. I would like to see a game where 20th level is something that is a little more regularly attainable, because as it is right now, high level play is such a small part of play. Like James and I finished Reign of Winter I think about a month ago now, and we were level 17, which is the highest level for that adventure path, for literally 2 combats. We had 1 combat and then we had the final fight, and we were level 17 for those 2 fights. And it was fun to get to use those cool powers, but it's not very satisfying to reach that pinnacle of play and not get to do things for, very long. So I'm hoping that both the mathematical improvements to the system and the overall like idea for, hey, this is how we're going to do adventures, leads to more high-level play and more people exploring those options. Right now in first edition and in every edition that's preceded it, high-level play gets a very bad rap that it probably deserves, to be frank, just because it's difficult to run, it's very time-consuming, and it tends to be, if I got the advantage on the first turn of the first round, I win. Bracket tag.
Well, and like you said, the highest level AP doesn't even go to 20. Like, it's something that...
Wrath of the Righteous does.
Yeah, Wrath
does
goes,
it?
And
it goes to level 20, Mythic Tier 10.
Return of the Rune Lords is going to go to 20, and Return of the Rune Lords is going to go to 20, and I think Shattered Star goes to 20. But I might be wrong about that last point.
I don't think I ever heard Shattered Star going that high.
Rise of the Rune Lords, I've seen my party got to 19. They didn't get all the way to 20, but they did get to 19.
Oh.
So since we're talking about levels, one of the things that I'm excited about, and this, as far as I know, has only been mentioned in a blog. It's not something we've seen in many of the other playtests or areas. XP, the new XP system.
Yeah, I saw that.
Thank goodness.
Double thumbs up. I was kind of hoping they'd take it a step further and go even more to the PFS idea of having like 3-pronged XP, but I understand why they would want to do at least multiples of 1,000, because it means you can give out tenths of a level or hundredths of a level or whatever. It makes it a little bit more divisible and easier to assign challenges to.
Well,
right. Well, I even would have been fine if they just straight up went Pathfinder Society and said, finish a chunk, reach a milestone, you get an XP, and you only need 3 for the next level. But the fact that it's like Pathfinder Society in that it's consistently, you got to your 1,000 level milestone, now move on to the next 1,000 XP milestone. I think I said 1,000 level. You don't have 1,000 levels, 1,000 XP.
And you know, I think what it comes down to is that the math for experience is just, it's daunting when you get down to handing out rewards, and frankly it's arbitrary because if you're fighting at challenge things, the way XP works is that it generally takes you the same amount of encounters. Like, I think it goes from like 3 to like 4 to then 5 and then eventually 6 at like the highest levels, but it's not significantly changing very much.
Now, actually, the secret is that Pathfinder 1e already works like this. If for those of you who have been here from the playtest, and remember when the new XP chart was introduced in the middle of the playtest, thanks to some forum members, and I forget their name, that actually helped come up with the math for this. Oh, I have to go, there's a little bit of a history lesson here. The reason that all this XP even became a subject in the first place is the XP chart was one of the very few things not added to the SRD from the OGL. So that's one thing that every single person that tried to make a game based off of D20 had to come up with their own, because the concept of XP and leveling was intentionally left out so that books that used the D20 license could not be standalone games. Now, obviously, books that were OGL and not D20 could do their own thing, but they had to make their own XP system, and that was true for Pathfinder. Their original XP system was just, again, numbers, but the system that they came up in place was an XP system that was mathematically supposed to be exactly 14 encounters of equal level on the fast track, to get yourself from level 1, or maybe it was medium track, but one of the tracks was 14 encounters, levels you up. And it was also designed so that the math increased exponentially, so that two lower level creatures equals a higher level creature, and so that's why the XP goes up as much as it does. And it's actually, if you compare the numbers at the top end, it's drastically higher than the 3.5 charts, because so that lower level monsters, if you added them together, it was -2 CR added together equals an equal level encounter, and that was true from 2 equal level ones is +2 CR. And because it uses that system, technically we are already using the 1000 XP system of relative XP, maybe not 1000, but we're already using a relative XP system. We're just pretending we're not by making the numbers bigger for the sake of making numbers bigger. And there's no reason we need to make the numbers bigger.
Mm-hmm. It's supposed to try to play into like the I'm getting so much better because look how big my number is getting, but it's not something that affects the game at all. It's just kind of needless bookkeeping. So it's something I'm glad to see it change.
I'm also glad to see bulk get rid of other needless bookkeeping.
Yeah, I was really glad to hear that I'm not sure whether they borrowed bulk from Starfinder or whether Starfinder borrowed bulk from the initial notes of the Pathfinder 2e playtest. It sounds like the latter rather than the former. But whatever the case may be, bulk is so much better. I heart bulk.
Okay, so for people
I need bulk explained to me.
Okay, so bulk in Starfinder, it is basically, instead of keeping track of weight by pounds or kilograms or some real world metric, items are listed in terms of their weight as bulk, and it's supposed to encompass both weight and size and just how difficult it is to carry this thing. Your character can carry bulk equal to their strength score, their actual strength score, and up to half of your strength. And they actually had to amend this to make it clear, because it was some one section of the book said one thing and the other. Half of your strength or lower, and you're unencumbered. And items are listed in bulk, or they're listed as what's the term they use? Light or okay, it's either bulk or 10 items of
light bulk.
Light bulk equals 1 bulk. And then there's no bulk. Items that just have no bulk. Negligible. And you can just carry all you want. So even if you have... This is why the Yosoki can carry 19 grenades in his mouth. which is in his or her mouth.
Amazing.
Because they can carry one bulk in their mouth, which means technically by the rules you can put one bulk in your mouth and and grenades are light bulk. So 10 grenades to get to one bulk and 9 more grenades because you're not at 2 bulk yet. But that 20th grenade would make you 2 bulk. So Yosokis can travel around with 19 grenades in their cheeks.
It's pretty great. All those bombs, you better hope that they don't detonate.
But I was going to say, is there like a necklace of fireball clause where if one fireball goes off, all of them go off?
I don't know, but there should be.
Well, Louise Loza is in chat. Maybe Louise can like design it and sneak it in, and then we can have our exploding rat men. Make it happen, Louise.
But as playing a lot of Starfinder, the bulk makes things a lot easier because it's dealing with a lot smaller numbers. It's really easy to tell at a glance how most things usually only weigh 1 bulk, and heavy things obviously are very big and heavy, and you notice it. So it is much easier to keep track of how much stuff you're carrying, and it takes what used to be the most dreaded part of a Pathfinder Society character, because you had to track weight in Society, and which was, by the way, the
gold weight technically.
Which is the only time I ever check weight in any game ever in Society, because I hate the mechanics so much that I don't even use it in any other game.
Nope.
And again, as a designer, I hate figuring out the weight of magic items. It's so much time spent on such a useless thing. Like, how much does a metal-rimmed hat weigh? Oh, I have to do real-world examples. I have to find the nearest approximation that already exists in the game. And it's for what? For someone to just ignore that stat on a magic item? So being able to figure out whether this counts as light bulk or bulk, that is so much easier.
So that's why the apparatus of the crab is the greatest magic item, because it's so heavy you don't need to track it.
No, it carries you.
Yes, exactly. It's so heavy you don't need to track it. It's the greatest magic item.
And that's why every when you're forced to track weight, I know every character I know just beelines for the quickest way they can get a handy harvest sack or bag of holding so they can stop caring about it. When you have a mechanic so bad that players are willing to spend resources to get away from it, you've done something wrong.
Yeah,
and especially when the magic item is a backpack, magic backpack. Yeah. That should not be a go-to item for all adventurers. Yeah. I mean, real adventurers, yes. If that was real, we would all love it. But fantasy adventurers, where we don't even have to, when we picture our characters, most of them are not even carrying all of their gear. The backpack shouldn't be one of those essential items,
unless it's the backpack from Dora the Explorer. That back is a wondrous item.
It's an intelligent item.
Yeah, it's great. You can find anything you want, and it'll sing to you, which means you'll automatically fail all your stealth checks.
We need to have a high ego, intelligent backpack that just takes over adventurers.
Does it though? I'm pretty sure that Dora's backpack doesn't ever become intelligent. It just sits there, and when she wants to open it, she starts singing. It joins her. It's probably got the ensemble feat that nobody takes from Pathfinder Advanced Player's Guide. Everything is great. It's just the singing backpack. Every bard should have that.
I like the idea. The adventure can't go on until 3 players at the table point out something on the map for it.
Yes. You can't draw any maps from it unless you point out 3 notable landmarks on a map. It's great. That's its curse. It's actually a cursed item. You are compelled. Oh man, I'm pretty sure that Chad is getting annoyed with our rambling about Dora the Explorer's backpack, though. Or maybe not. Lone Dwarf 14 is laughing. Oh, I don't think it's about that. Okay, moving on.
Alex, have you told us something about Pathfinder 2nd Edition we know that really excites you?
The concept of having ancestry feats actually really excites me. I think that, in my personal opinion, I think that your ancestry, previously called your race, now called ancestry, is probably the most important decision that you make for your character in terms of their background, because your ancestry should determine very much so where your character was from, what kind of experiences they had growing up, maybe what sort of items your character valued to bring with them on their adventures. It's cool and exciting to be hey, as I get better, I get more abilities because I am my race. one of the things that always stuck with me is in the advanced race guide, where like they have the different categories of power for races, going from like standard to monstrous, and it's like, yeah, the class feature abilities eventually will catch up and balance these out at high levels, because race doesn't matter much after like 10th level. So it's cool to see these ancestry feats that's like, no, your race does matter. If you want to be the dwarfiest dwarf who's ever dwarfed the inner sea, you can do that.
And you don't have to do it at the expense of also being the dwarf-fighteriest fighter dwarf that ever fight dwarves. No, I lost it.
No. I still,
but anyway,
I'm
yeah,
still
so
suspect
it seems like
about this
it's
dwarfy
very
dwarf.
hard to advance as your race in first edition. What's that?
So I'm still suspect about this
war.
dwarfy dwarf thing, because dwarves got no love in Pathfinder First Edition. We're about to get through the entire thing, and like, oh my gosh, I mean, we got giants, and Cyclops has got more love than one of the core races of the game.
Yeah, hopefully they fix that. That's kind of a big oversight. There's some dwarf stuff in Iron Fang that takes your interest, but it's not like the dwarfiest adventure path.
Every time I bring it up, there's some dwarf stuff in this, and they did that one softcover 32-page dwarf book 5 years ago, and I mean, I'm not even a dwarf fan.
Oh, it wasn't 5 years ago. That book is older than the Pathfinder role-playing game.
No, it uses the real.
It is.
The elf book is the one that's older.
Does it?
Yeah. The elf book is the only one that was for technically for 3.5, not Pathfinder.
Then that would probably still mean that book is as old as the core rulebook. It's got to be at least 10 years old. I don't think it's 5 years old.
It's old.
It is very
old. And it's the only love dwarves got, and it wasn't even that good a book. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it was not like
if we're completely if we're completely honest, if we're being completely honest, unless you are a human, your race probably did not get love in Pathfinder.
If you were Azamar, and to some extent Kitsune,
well, Azamar got one book too. Kitsune got a couple smatterings of articles in various different books, all of which that I'm pretty sure I wrote, except for the Advanced Race Guide one. I didn't write the ones in the Dragon Empire Primer either, or the Gazetteer. So not all of them, but like they got little smatterings. And as somebody who's written a lot of them tend to be very like regurgitory, in the sense that like, I need to present this information to a player assuming they do not know this about this race almost every single time, because it's a Pathfinder race that isn't core, that does not get used very often. So it's like, hey, we got to remind the people some basic information about these guys because it's necessary, and then we can get to some cool new stuff. So I guess that would be on my wish list, to see more support for ancestries that are not just, humans and goblins. I feel like goblins got a lot out of Pathfinder 1e. So much so that in Pathfinder 2e, they are a core race now.
Is anyone excited about this, of the three of us?
Of the goblins? I think it's playing to the fan base, but I actually I'm kind of hoping it doesn't turn out badly. Like, it's a monstrously evil race. It doesn't really play well with others very well.
I mean, like, they can always invent new flavor and new lore to support, goblins of a better alignment scheme, because, like I mentioned to Eric in last week's podcast, they are overwhelmingly presented as evil, bad monsters. And developers have come and said these are evil, bad monsters, and if you are making a Goblin PC, you are playing a creature type that is normally an evil, bad monster and should suffer the necessary repercussions. Clearly, that's something they want to change, and the publisher in me thinks it makes perfect sense, for the same reason I keep using Kitsune over and over again, because it's my company's identity. They use the goblins so much in their advertising and their product that, of course, that race needs to be core in their core rulebook. However, the player in me sees that it's going to be the race that is probably going to end up being the Kender. Again, like I said in the last book, and I'm not really looking forward to it. I'm hoping in my heart of hearts that my mind is going to be changed, and they're going to do something leading up to Pathfinder 2e that explains why we have all of these goblins that apparently are not going to be evil. And, I have a friend in our Wrath of the Righteous game who played a Goblin Paladin, and it worked really well playing against that type. Playing against type is awesome, but the current flavor for goblins does not leave a whole lot of room for that. So I think I need to see that before I can get on board with goblins as a core race.
I believe Logan
core
implied
ancestry.
that there was going to be like an offshoot, that it's going to be a most social branch of goblin, that it's not going to be just we're adding or we're changing what goblins are. It's that we're adding a subtype of goblin that lets you play them as a playable race without having to do all the goblin stuff that makes them popular, which goes to like that 90s Marvel era where they were turning all their bad guys into heroes but taking away everything that made them cool bad guys, and people were like, well, why did you do that? What is the point? It is not the thing that we liked. The thing that we liked does not fit into this by design.
Or maybe I should reference one of the most 90s of D&D characters of Dritz Durden, and then how suddenly good Drow just flooded all of D&D for heckin' ever.
So I agree with you, but if my memory serves correctly, Wizards never tried to make Drow a player race after that. Like, they still always presented them as like, this is an antagonist race, and there are some exemplary characters, which honestly calling a member of a race exemplary is pretty racist. But that's kind of what the original flavor was alluding to.
Well, if we're talking about pretty racist, the Drow.
Yeah.
I mean, do we need to see the cover of Queen? What was it?
No,
Pit of the
we don't need
Spider
to talk
Queen?
about it. Nope, we don't need to talk about it. We're gonna brush it under the spider webs, and we're gonna move on from that product. So yeah, I kind of feel like it determines how it's mostly how they handle it and how they present it, and if they're consistent in that presentation. Starfinder's space goblins are kind of flavored in a way that makes it so that they are not the chaotic, evil, crazy, pyromantic, book-burning monsters of Pathfinder.
Well,
they could do something like that.
They explained that because these were the goblins that didn't become extinct when laser guns were introduced in the equation. Because normal goblins, if you weren't a little bit off type, you would have killed yourself the second a plasma grenade was introduced to your tribe.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe some of the flavor we're going to get is like, oh, Isger restarted the Goblin Blood Wars in this time span, and maybe that'll be our last adventure path before Pathfinder 2 or something, and you literally go out and murder most of the chaotic, evil, crazy goblins. That would be a really interesting Paizo adventure path. I'd be intrigued by that decision. What about you guys?
You know what? I would be on board for just wiping out all the goblins. Get it out of your system before they become a playable race, and you don't feel like you can kill goblins with extreme prejudice.
So this is Die Vecna Die, but involving genocide instead?
Yes, genocide, goblins, genocide.
But think about it.
We kill goblins.
If any nation was going to have the players do this, wouldn't it be Isger?
Sure.
That's where the Goblin Blood Wars happen. Like, Gallows of Madness goes very much into depth about how the people feel about goblins and viewing them as like boogeymen and stuff. I think it would be something that would be cool. I don't think it's going to happen, but that would be the kind of thing that would make me go, all right, Paizo, I buy this.
And that brings us to a listener question from Ilmc Hammer 292, who asks, is Paizo moving the campaign setting forward with the new edition, or is it staying static?
We got that answer from Eric, right?
Yeah.
I'm not crazy.
Yeah, and it's also
it was
the
never
FAQ.
static. It always moves forward 1 year, every year. This time they're just going to officially say all the adventure paths that have happened or that have been published have officially happened as of the date of the second edition. So there's no major time jump. There's no gap. There's no 4E retcon of the entire setting. It's just the same thing, but with one hard and fast rule of, yes, those campaign settings happened, and we're assuming that they ended favorably for the players.
All right, Para, Brian, lightning round.
Wait, no, we still got to talk about my concern about goblins.
No.
And that they're taking away, like, a good version of a goblin is a lot like my version of a gnome, and I love gnomes. And I am worried that they are going to start stealing the gnome shtick.
That's a good point. That is a very good point. Man, oh man, I never realized how gnomes even have a pyromaniac racial trait in Pathfinder, don't they?
Yep. Gnomes are kind of the tinkerers, and goblins, it seems like, especially with the alchemist being a goblin now, and I don't know what happened to Damiel. I hope that's kind of explained somewhere. The alchemist archetype, iconic, now being a goblin, kind of implies that even that aspect of gnomes, not just being the chaotic good race, but being the chaotic good tinkering race, what's left from the gnomes? Are they just going to be the playable Fey race now?
Well, also
I
remember
think it
that
would be
the
really
tinkering race was something they did not want gnomes to have. They were supposed to always be the Fey race, and the tinkering clockwork aspect of everything was they did not want Pathfinder to have steampunk clockwork in it at all. And only begrudgingly have they let some of that slip in. Gnomes were always supposed to be the Fey race and never the Tinker Gnomes.
Well, no, but they were also supposed to be obsessive. That's part of the. That was even a new mechanic that was added to the gnome. Obsessive, yeah, and it wasn't limited to what they were obsessed over, and that's where the idea of the Tinkerers and the Adventurers and the pseudoscientist gnomes come in. That's just their obsession.
I guess we'll have to see. I'm not sure. Honestly, I've liked their kind of Fey obsessiveness as part of their identity in Pathfinder. I thought that was something that was cool and strong, but you're right. A good goblin would definitely step on that identity. That would step on it a lot.
Well, most games
So
usually
that's something
have
I am going to be watching.
Most games usually try to have at least the one small, quirky, cute race, and Pathfinder has 3.
I mean,
Well, yeah, second edition will.
I mean, I don't think goblins are cute at all. They're monsters, man. Monsters.
They've
monster.
turned them into a plushie. They have jumped the monster shark already.
You know what? Like, if you want to talk to me about the cute small guy, my vote is firmly in the court of the Skittermander. That is what a cute small race looks like to me. Goblins are monsters. They have needle teeth and they sing murder songs. That is not cute. That is, I run from that or I kill that. Which is, again, why I think a lot of people are a little up in the air with how goblins as an ancestry will work.
All right, Alex, you wanted to do a lightning round of what? Things that we're still excited about?
No, I wanted to do a lightning round of how do you think, which top 2, we'll do 2 because there's 3 of us, 2 campaign adventure paths, how are they going to affect the new Paizo setting, the updated Galarian? Oh, boom, lightning round.
Well,
I'll go first.
Hold up, before we start.
Things are a lot more hostile.
Eric already told us about the world wound, so let's skip that one because we already got told.
Okay.
So Cheliax, I think, is going to be a lot more hostile because the major Cheliax adventure paths, or at least Hell's Rebels and Hell's Vengeance, they kind of end at opposite points of a major conflict.
Yeah.
This isn't a spoiler because I haven't actually reached the end of Hell's Rebels, but just I know that they both happen at the same time, and in one of them you're trying to free part of Cheliax, and one of them you are trying to maintain order. So right now there is high tension in Cheliax if both of those adventure paths ended at the same time.
Yeah. I'm thinking Kintargo is going to be a free city-state after Hell's Rebels. I think that's one of mine. The other one is I think that that there's going to be a new monarch on the throne of Whiterun, and no spoilers, but I think it's going to be the person introduced in Book 5 of that adventure path. At least that's my hope. I really hope it's that person.
We need to very clearly, I don't think we did, but massive spoilers for the next 5 minutes, gang.
Oh, it won't take you guys 5 minutes, will it?
I'm just telling them a place
That took me 10 seconds.
We're going to laugh and make fun of each other for 5 minutes after we give our answers.
All right, you give your answers so
okay.
I can laugh and make fun of you for 4 minutes and 50 seconds.
Well, speaking of Drow, Second Darkness is, so Drow exist?
Yeah, that's true. But even that was reflected in as early as like 2nd edition Pathfinder Society, if I remember right, or Season 2 Pathfinder Society, for a better term. Because they have the Drow, the Darkland Pyramids one.
Yeah, but they still barely touch them, and it's still
that is
a
the
very
lowest
rarity.
That is the lowest rated Pathfinder Adventure Path too. Like very few people have even played it just based on the 1-star rating and the what is it, a 1 hour playtime?
I have played it and run it. I've done both.
And did you enjoy it either time?
I enjoyed running it because it meant I got to go home early. Your turn, right?
Well, I already said about Cheliax. The other thing, I'm curious what's going to happen to the Stolen Lands, which is where Kingmaker takes place, because before Kingmaker, this is just an unexplored, unclaimed territory. Then Kingmaker happens, and it's go and claim this unclaimed territory, and then the unclaimed territory fights back. So I'm curious if there will be a kingdom established in there, or if it will just be established as, don't build a kingdom in there, that territory will kill you.
It would be kind of fun to see if, some of the bad endings for the adventure paths became canon. Like, Kingmaker's bad ending would be really interesting. I've read that one, and I thought that one was fascinating.
Well, they did say that most of them would be favorable, and as Justin Franklin 3000 points out in chat, Second Darkness and Strange Aeons have to end favorably, or there is no Galarian.
Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of them that need to end favorably, or there's no Galarian. Those two are two big ones. Ruins of Aslanti kind of needs to end favorably.
All the Rune Lord ones need to end
Carrion
favorably.
Crown didn't end favorably, we would have the Whispering Tyrant back, and that would actually be the more interesting option.
That is more,
true.
We need because we do need some big bad guys, because we have sort of been assassinating them very effectively throughout the APs for the last little bit.
Yeah,
Irisen's going to be a giant political vacuum.
I am still hoping that we get the person in book 4, like I said. But that doesn't mean that person has to have absolute control at this point. You know, it could be a giant, like, Game of Thrones with witches, which would be kind of funny. I'm down for that.
It'll also be interesting to see how Return of the Rune Lords ends, because right now Karzum is kind of the go-to, like the face of the Rune Lords as far as characters we've interacted with. There's a couple of them, other ones that have shown up, and there's a couple of them that I believe have never shown up in an adventure path in like physical form. So if Return of the Rune Lords brings them back, then we've got a whole ring of new baddies to deal with.
Yeah. And you know, it would be unexpected, because I think there's a strong sentiment among some players, not all of them, but like people who are in the community, they're like, oh, Jacobs will never do anything bad to Varisia. So like watching Jacobs do something really bad to Varisia might be great.
There's just a giant crater on that part of the Galarian.
Yeah. Boom. Except Sandpoint. They're like, no, we just made a campaign setting guide. We can't blow that up. Here, there's Sandpoint.
Well,
and then the crazy
Sandpoint became an island community.
Oh man, how did this happen? So
the inner
I
sea
think
gains a new river. It's just filled with the tears of the Varisians.
so many Varisians. I think it's a good point to mention that, like, one of the reasons we're talking so much about the campaign setting in this episode is that it's been confirmed that the campaign setting is going to be integrated into the core rulebook, much like the Starfinder campaign setting was integrated into the Starfinder core rulebook. I've seen mixed thoughts on this. What do you guys think about it?
Oh,
that is one of my major concerns.
Yeah,
that's one of the things I like a lot. This is where me and
so
Brad butt heads.
There are two things that Param and I argue about pretty consistently. One of them is campaign setting integration into the core into the rulebook line, and one of them is monster creation.
Yep.
And like I got both of my ways in first edition, so I can understand there would be a change in the second one. And we could talk about monster creation later and how I have ways of accepting that monster creation change. But campaign setting integrations just burns me. For a few reasons. One of them is that it was very poorly handled in the Adventurer's Guide, which, as a book, felt fairly rushed in a lot of parts. So I wouldn't say that that is the template for how the second edition will integrate campaign setting. But what bugs me is that the way it works now is that if you are a person who needs a campaign setting, you've got a whole line. You can go and buy it, and it tells you how to run it. If you are a person who does not need a campaign setting, you have to buy campaign setting material you do not like and will not use. And it also means that the core rulebook line now, which previously could be a little more gonzo with its options, because even though Glaren's a kitchen sink setting, it was a kitchen sink setting that still had its limits, whereas the core rulebook or the RPG hardcover book line could go a little further than even Galarian was accepting, because it didn't matter, because Galarian didn't actually need all of the stuff that was in that rulebook line. Now that rulebook line has to have the same restraints as the Galarian campaign setting, and that's unfortunate. That is limited creatively, and it limits what Pathfinder players can gain access to needlessly, in my opinion.
Well, it does create a good vacuum for third-party publishers to exploit.
That is true.
If you're playing Pathfinder Society, you don't care that there's no steampunk guide, because there's no steampunk in the world. What do you think, Param? Please tell me while I drink my tea, like a gentleman.
I think that it's the fact that the campaign setting was divorced from the game is something that has been true of very few games, and usually only like D&D and generic systems do not marry a campaign setting to their rules, and that all of the options when I'm reading a book, when I'm reading the RPG line, and I'm reading these things, and it's like this generic name for this option for a class when it's very obviously is trying to tie into something for the campaign setting, or they're having to hold back and just give us the most bland vanilla versions of class options, and the really cool and flavorful stuff comes in the soft cover addendum book that always launches a month later. I think I think that by having to stay so neutral, they limit themselves in their creativity and, more importantly, being able to marry interesting flavor to these options by forcing them to be generic to fit into everybody's possible campaign setting. And this way, they can offer us, just some things like the Red Mantis Assassins right off the bat that don't have to be just generic Assassin's Guild. Because if you look at the Villain Codex compared to the Adventurer's Guide, that's night and day. You have the Villain Codex where it's like generic Assassin's Guild, and then the Adventurer's Codex, which didn't handle it the best, but then you got to hear things like, and here is the Shadow Lodge, and how these two things are very much different uses, where one has actual story hooks and evocative imagery and actually being able to name things and characters and important uses and use them in the table for a game that you're likely going to be playing. You're likely going to be using Galarian if especially since it ties into PFS, and that's one of the most popular ways to play Pathfinder. So you might as well has it. And I think it's going to be harder to add all the juice to the core rulebook line than it is to just scratch the serial numbers off the stuff you don't like.
So I cannot believe you're calling the Villain's Codex options generic. Those were extremely evocative, and on top of it, it was evocative in a way that it didn't say, this is how you have to use it. It's, we are giving you inspiring options. Now use that inspiration. Put it in the world how you see fit, how it benefits your world the best.
It actually, in the back of the book, has additional organizations that just like cherry pick different stat blocks from throughout the book. So here's a different organization with these guys in it, which is pretty cool. I personally sit in between the two of you. As a player, I don't really care all that much. Most of my gaming nowadays has been in Galarian and in Pathfinder Society, so if they want to have the flavor, it doesn't really bother me all that much. And if I'm homebrewing, most times it's pretty easy to transfer things. The only time it's really tough for me is when things are tied to like gods or specific organizations in the world. That is really tough. But like if you're saying this archetype is used by people who are mostly from Kier, that doesn't bother me. I can get rid of that. I can move it somewhere else. So in my perfect world, everything would be written as setting neutral, but there would be like sidebars or other bits of information that explain how these things fit into Galarian. So it wouldn't be in the actual rules, but it would be in the book, placing context into what was in it. And the reason I feel that way is because I'm a publisher, and it's a real pain in the butt how, in order to use things that have proper nouns in them, we have to basically file off the serial numbers. And that works well when you're a home GM or you're a home player, but when you are a publisher and you're trying to stay consistent with other publishers and we're all changing things in a non-standardized way, it is a pain in the butt. So, in my opinion, having a little bit from Param's column and a little bit from Ryan's column would be optimal. And I'm sorry if that seems like the moderate path to take in this wonderful discussion.
It is the purple option when I'm arguing red and he's arguing blue.
And hey, I'm wearing purple.
Oh, yeah. It does answer Lone Dwarf 14's question about will Galarian be OGL? No, it won't. So, no. Just like the gods in the first edition core rulebook are not OGL because they are proper names, that's just called out in the back matter, the legal text in the back of the book. It says specifically these are the kind of things that are not going to be included in this. So even if half the book, and I really doubt it'll be that much, is Galarian specific content, that will never be added to the OGL. The mechanics can be, as long as, like Alex said, you file the serial numbers off.
Yeah. And one thing they started doing at the end when they did start to mix their chocolate and peanut butter is at the back of the Adventurer's Guide, they give intentionally, here is the official generic name for this class for you third-party people out there.
Yeah. And that would be helpful. I hope they do something like that. Personally, I think, sidebars would be better, but if they want to keep doing an appendix in the back, as long as there's something standardized, I'm cool. I'm very cool with it standardized. And obviously, I don't think that needs to be true when we're talking about like 2E content in like specifically campaign setting guide stuff. If I'm going to pull an archetype from your Taverns of the Inner Sea book or whatever, like, and I have to change stuff, that is part of the job coming from a Taverns of the Inner Sea book. It's just, it's tougher when it's the core rules that I have to change.
I mean, maybe
speaking of changing.
Maybe third-party publishers just need to form the League of Imaginary Nations and just sort of make your own standardized documents.
That would be pretty good. I don't know how realistic it would be to get like every new person who ever decides to write for it into the league.
I think if the big boys did it, then the little fry have to follow or else be irrelevant. That's how real
Because they're so little they don't realize who the big boys are and just do their own thing.
If you're so little that you don't know who the major people are in your industry, you need to reconsider whether or not you need to be competing in that industry.
Oh,
speaking of being competitive in the industry, one of the arguments I will say in favor of integrating campaign setting material is 5e had a lot of success with its campaign-specific titled books. So Xanathar's Guide to Everything is the most successful 5th edition book outside of the core rule books, and that is a specific beholder from the Forgotten Realms setting. Just it's a book flavored after that character. And traditionally in first edition, all of the hardcover books had the most bland titles. It was the Advanced Player's Guide, Advanced Race Guide, Advanced Class Guide. You knew exactly what you were getting in the most straightforward, bland way. Whereas the campaign setting books had really evocative names, curious names, games that you didn't know what you were getting, but gave you a feeling just reading the titles. If they go that direction with the hardcover line, one, it'll separate it from first edition, which I am all in favor of. Second edition having more of an identity beyond just new mechanics, but it also seems to be the popular way, at least with modern role-playing players.
Uh-oh. I saw somebody ask for the thing that we want to talk about, but we haven't touched yet, Param.
Oh, yeah.
See? No, Ander91 brought it up. Oh, so did MC Hammer. Oh, no. I feel like it's coming.
We're getting to that. We're getting to that, but we don't want to... But I have something to counter on that. Is there's a lot of factors that made that book the best-selling 5th edition book, in one of them being it's the only player-centric book to be released for that game in several years. But I do think that you're right. It opens up a lot of opportunity, because some of my favorite D&D books were like Volo's Guide to Waterdeep and that sort of stuff. Where I think that just when you have, listen, I know this is not true for most new players, okay, but for a lot of us old timers, man, we've been doing this for decades. We've seen all the generic stuff. It's the really unique, flavorful takes. It's your Game of Thrones. It's your I'm following over my own examples, but it's the unique twists. It's the actual putting faces and character and details into the tropes that we've already seen a billion times. That is where the potential new verdant spaces are. We've just got so much of the generic stuff in the past that I think not all the future design space, but most of the future design space is going to have to differentiate itself somehow.
I'm okay moving on.
Okay.
But I disagree.
Okay. I'm glad you guys have come to a civil agreement, so now we can
civil
talk
disagreement.
about a civil disagreement. So now we can talk about the thing that is very rapidly civilly, or maybe not so civilly, disagreeing the community, which is the new resonance mechanic that just got I guess it's not new in the sense that like it's clearly been in the playtest since they've had it, but it's just come out of the Glass Cannon podcast, parts 3 and 4, and that's the resonance system.
Yeah, this is one of the few things that Eric, Mona, and Logan Bonner would not talk about during the last episode, because they were obviously planning a big reveal with it. So
yeah,
do you want to explain what the resonance is?
Yeah. So resonance is essentially your character's ability to make use of the majority of magic items in the game. You effectively get this pool of points. It's not described as such, if I recall correctly, but you basically get a pool of points, and it's equal to your level plus your charisma. and
charisma bonus.
your charisma modifier. And every time you use an item that is not a weapon or a magic suit of armor, a magic item that is not a magic weapon or a magic suit of armor, that is, you have to spend a point from your resonance pool in order to use it. So at least this is what it sounds like from what we've gotten from the podcast so far. Obviously, the playtest document is not in our hands, so we're speculating based on what we've heard and what's been said about the system in posts so far on the Paizo forums. And so basically, this affects everything from like, I have magic boots that let me fly. All right, resonance needs to go in that to make them work for the day. I want to drink this potion of healing. All right, resonance needs to go into that, or you drink the potion and nothing happens. And it's very much divided the community. It sounds like this is a replacement for the item slot system. I believe Eric and Logan said that system would not be carried over into 2E, if I remember. Is that right, Ryan?
That's what they said.
That's what I remember saying, too.
Yeah. It sounds like this is a replacement for that. And mostly the reactions I've seen to this system on the thread so far have been quite negative. Quite negative.
It's a very gamery system. This is very much a artificial system to address a meta game issue, and it doesn't tie into much of the fiction behind the world at all, because it implies that we are empowering the magic items ourselves, not that the magic items have power in them.
So
it's just how you synergize with the magic items you're using.
It's your body's ability to draw out and benefit from the magic of the item. And I guess the idea is that you can't do it that often because too many conflicting magical auras makes the spectrum burn or whatever. Honestly, that's one of the big problems I have with this system. This isn't something from 1E. This is an entirely new mechanic. It feels very gamey, and so far I haven't heard a convincing, not even from like the developers, but from like the community. No one has come up with a convincing, this is why this is happening. This is why this has not happened in Pathfinder 1E. Like this to me is kind of like, you would need like, I'm sorry, I'm going to bring this up. You would need a spell scar incident to explain this.
Yeah.
And it would not go over well. This is a system that is drastically changing how magic items effectively function. I think this is going to be one of those extreme things that they try, the community is not going to like, and they're going to roll back to an item slot system. That's going to be my prediction.
Imperiusor also mentions that.
I like this fundamentally. Like I've always been a big fan of the idea of magical pollution, that just using magic too much is corrupting the world. That's what makes it magic. It's something that's not supposed to be here, that some people are just so good that they've pulled it into our world. And this lines up with that interpretation, and it's not really in the flavor.
It really doesn't. You've kind of made that flavor up. It's just a
I know, but that's headcanon for how magic works.
I mean that could be cool, maybe, but it doesn't explain why my 13th level venture captain investigator is wearing a magic item in every single slot, and why he doesn't have this type of magic cancer right now.
Now, it's very possible we get feats that allow just basically the additional resonance points feat that lets you use that many more, because I know some people are complaining about the roll, but the roll only comes in after you've used up your level plus charisma modifier of points that let you use it, and unless I'm mistaken, it's always just 1 point no matter what the magic item is, right?
Yeah.
We haven't heard different.
We actually don't know. We don't know how many points it takes. The only thing we know is that it doesn't apply to weapons and armor, which honestly, that in and of itself feels very gamey. The fact that it, like, the two items that all the marshals are going to want are explicitly not affected. It's like, oh, this is not a lore thing. This is because this is convenient thing. So T.S. Rodriguez says the big mistake was not explaining the mechanic with lore. It feels too gamey. I agree with that. And I'm actually all for them limiting potions. That mechanic, if resonance makes it in, would effectively stop the happy stick phenomenon, because
which
you would have
it sounds like it was made specifically just to kill happy sticks. I mean, it's a whole rule system that seems to be targeted at one specific thing.
No. Like I said earlier, I always preferred martial characters, and the magic item, the amount of magic my martial characters have by like 6th level makes them feel barely martial. I want the guy that's just going in there and throwing his sword around, and yes, if he has a couple of things that, like if he has more magic items than Aladdin, it feels like he is a magic item based character. I just want the guy that it's like, these are my tricks. this one magic item that I go to often enough is one of my tricks, but I don't want at one point magic items to define my character as much as my class features.
That's a good point. One thing, other people in chat and both in the forums are also kind of like not cool with it being charisma. Honestly, charisma based, I should clarify.
Glad it's charisma.
Honestly, I am glad it's charisma too, because you needed a mechanic that makes dumping charisma a bad idea. And I feel like I don't think everybody who is upset about it being charisma is upset because now they can't dump charisma in good faith. I think a lot of people are. And I think that every ability score should have something that it does that if you choose to tank it, it affects your character. And charisma really doesn't, because you can just stand in the back and let the oracle talk for you.
Well, plus charisma has been established as this is your connection to the magical world. That's why sorcerers have high charisma, because they are just in tune with the world. Why bards have it. It's the classes that get magic without having to try, just through force of personality, are charisma based. And so it makes perfect sense to me that this would be charisma based. It is the magic attunement ability score.
I agree. I think that resonance is not a bad idea, but I think they need to be a little more like, I think that making every potion take a point is a little excessive, personally. If you want to do it to wands to stop the happy stick, I think that's fine. But I think it needs a little more clarification, but I don't think it needs to be thrown out with the bathwater.
Now, we don't know how the magic item system is going to work fully yet, and that's sort of been the language they're coming back at as the criticism raises is, hey, wait till you see the magic items and how they work. And if this is because they've made magic items much more powerful, so that you would basically, they would not want unlimited uses of these massively powerful magic items, that makes more sense. So I'm kind of on the fence until I see what the full picture here and see how it ties into everything. I like the idea from a meta level, but the fact that it is such a meta system is really grating on my narrativist roots.
I agree.
What's funny is that my one objection to it is the mechanics, not their function, but just me as a player, because I hate expendable elements of a character. So I could see myself just like laboring over a decision of like, I'm down to 1 hit point, but I don't want to use any of my resonance points because I won't get that back until tomorrow, which I probably won't live to see. But it's just like, oh, I don't want to spend anything.
I usually find that when a player is on the verge of losing their character, that part finally eases up.
Yeah.
I think for many characters, there's going to be the fear that I need to save these points for my healing potions so that we can keep going for the day. At least that's the kind of thing that would hit me. Like, James yells at me all the time when we play our Pathfinder Adventure Paths, because I'm the guy who'll sit on his hero points and not spend them until like I need to use them to stabilize to stop dying. Like, and so that's something that I think is a real concern too. Is potions going to be like the best way to heal? Am I going to have to spend it on that? If they come up with something like an elixir of healing that you can drink without expending resonance, that might work. For now, I'm kind of in the wait and see camp, but kind of pessimistic about the mechanic.
There's other things in the wait and see camp we're going to get to. That'll probably be what we conclude with, but let's stick with things that we are flat out, what I've heard about, I'm concerned about. Is there anything on your list still, Param?
That I'm concerned about?
Yeah.
I was concerned about the not scaling magic. Let's see how that would work. But they've since come out and explained what that meant, and that kind of killed all the concerns I had for it. They've come out and said that, okay, so scaling magic, everybody always points to the damage magic as the part where they say scaling magic bad. But anybody who has any amount of system mastery for Pathfinder knows that the damage magic is the worst magic. If you're trying to compete in DPR as a magic caster, you have to bend your character backwards with like twin-blooded multi-classing shenanigans to compete with the melee for damage. Just for individual hits, not even just damage per round, just for individual hits. And Pathfinder 1E has, in their published adventure path, loved the party against a single monster. almost all encounters are party against a single monster, so the fact that you had area effect damage is kind of negligible. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you can hit 3 monsters when there's only ever 1 monster. And because reflex saves are not too hard to hit, most of the time you're dealing half damage anyway. So the damage needed a buff if in Pathfinder, not a nerf. And so the fact that they were not going to scale them made me worry. So what they said was in the forums, they knew that the damage needed help, and that an example they said is, well, what if instead of getting Fireball at level 5 and it being functionally useless until you leveled up a few times, you instead just got Fireball and it already did max damage, and that's what it meant, or some equivalent thereof. And then they said that that's not exactly what they're doing. It's based on the new math, but the damage spells very intentionally will start at a set damage that is already very high, higher than an individual melee hit. And the reason I think that that's fine is because the not damage spells didn't need to scale. The Saver Suck is still suck. You're still out of the combat. The debuffs and the control aspects of the casters never did need to scale. You never need to worry about that, and they always did great. The things that needed to scale was already the worst parts of those classes, so if they're buffing them overall, I've got less of a concern of it.
My kind of thoughts on that is, like, I mean, we haven't seen what a spell will look like in Pathfinder, but in Starfinder, one of the things that bothers me is the game is sort of set up that you're always going to want to be throwing out your low-level damage spells and a lot of your old-level offensive spells for, like, the next best level at, like, max level, and then you're just going to swap them out for utilities, which, to me, kind of further increases the divide between spellcasters and marshals, because utility in the party was never a place that a wizard struggled in,
right.
You know? It was always, you know, the worst thing for them was dealing damage, and so now you're making them focus on their best spells for those if they want to be relevant, which they probably won't. They'll probably stick with the saving stocks that work at pretty much any level, and then now instead you're convincing them to just not take those damage spells even more. You know, it's kind of punishing it rather than, you know, it's kind of pushing them more into that niche rather than trying to even it out. And I'm hoping that Pathfinder 2e stays away from that, but again, don't know.
Yeah, we need to see it.
That magic missiles though in the Glass Cannon podcast, where it's like 1 action I touch you and you blow up, 2 actions I fire my missiles at you from far away, 3 actions missiles everybody, Reaper, die.
Yeah, and the healing spell
that is great.
Oh, this healing spell, which is the hit point in the other direction version of that, was also great.
Color me positively optimistic at this point. I think it's going to be great, but we need to know more.
I hope that they go in the... honestly, I do hope they adopt more of the Starfinder and Psionics and get a lot of the scaling spells as a way.
Yeah, I like those. So, Ryan, I have a concern, and I don't think you're going to agree with me, so I'm going to warn you in advance. The way they've described how weapon qualities works worries me.
Ooh.
I disagree.
I figured.
You called it. Yeah, no, I like the weapon qualities quite a bit.
Explain this to me. I've missed this one.
Okay. So weapon qualities in Pathfinder 2e, based on what we've seen from the playtest data, is like they tend to be very big, flashy things. Like you have a finesse property where that weapon is a weapon finesse weapon. You can use attack to hit with it. And they have other ones that are like, I think Scimitar has one where if you attack multiple people with one attack, like a cleave, then you get a bonus on that attack roll. And like in terms of big, flashy things, that sounds cool. And I will not deny that having that scimitar actively affect your playstyle sounds like something that could be interesting. But where I worry is that we're going to have the opposite. We're going to have the same problem in Pathfinder, which is the same weapons get used over and over again, except it's going to be characters of the same fighting style are stuck using the same weapons because they're going to compare those weapons, see which one is the most optimized for their strategy. Hey, I'm a cleave guy, and the best cleave weapon is that scythe because it's got the highest weapon damage. Cleave lol, and then everybody who runs around in cleave lols is going to use a scythe. And then eventually someone is going to figure out what the most DPS optimized combat strategy is, and so then everyone you're going to see is going to use that same fighting strategy with that same weapon. That is, I don't know that that's going to happen, but that's sort of like my number one concern in hearing that weapons are so integratedly tied to how, like, what you do in a fight. Good.
I think that's going to happen regardless. Like, whether it's the weapon qualities that define it, or just the damage of the weapons and their classing, there's always the role-playing games are just a giant math equation, and people that want to solve for X, where X is the most dead monsters in the least amount of time, are always going to run that equation because we're nerds. Half of them are computer programmers, and this is just natural tendency to do it. So it doesn't matter what the role-playing game system is, the options are always going to be mathed out to find out what it is, and then the care-op people are going to broadcast that out once they've done it, and then everybody's going to be like, well, obviously you're playing that class wrong because you're using a lance and you really should be using a scythe.
Yeah, well, my quarterstaff Magus got a lot of hate for that.
And that's why I think that the impact of weapons should be minimalized, and all of those cool powers should be baked into the things that give them. Like, if you are going to assume that cleave is the most optimized when you are using a scimitar, then take that away from the scimitar and just put it into the cleave feat or what. I don't know if cleave is a feat, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that to me is just arbitrarily assigning weapons to fighting styles, and then eventually weapons that are not part of the best fighting style will go away. Sort of like how every soldier I've ever seen has been blitzed so far.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you extrapolate that backwards, though, you run into the problem that you run into with, like, Warhammer, where it's just, I have one-handed weapon, two-handed weapon, and that's all. That's all that is defined there.
So the reason I like weapon qualities is that it adds a little more personality to the riders that were already on there. Like, I know most people, when they first see a trip weapon, they assume that they get the same trip power as a wolf, and then you have to show them that, no, it just means that if you fail the trip, then you don't get tripped, and it's like, why did I even pay attention to this special ability? It is so situational and useless, I don't care. Whereas now it does feel like the weapons have personality, and these personalities are represented by a type, and it feels like all weapons are actually getting a type. So yes, there will probably be the best weapon by that type, and they will probably be scaled by value, like by gold cost, which means that yes, at some level you will be able to afford the better one, and then you will plateau at the better one. If there was a solution for that, I would love to see it. But I don't think that that's a reason to not do this more interesting version of weapons, and to take a lot of what was cool about magic weapons and just say, no, weapons are like that. It's likewise, actually, what I thought you were saying about weapon quality was how they've broken masterwork weapon into 3 categories, which is expert masterwork and like glorious or legendary or something. And it's just a +1 weapon, +2 weapon, +3 weapon as we knew it from first edition. Only now it's just in the crafting, and it feels like the crafting of the weapon matters more, because masterwork in 1E is like just the step you have to take to get the magical enchantment. It's a minor boost that you get for a while, but it completely defeats that scene that you get of like, look at this glorious weapon that I have crafted, and it's like, it's truly, I have never seen its match. Like, that is a major part of lore, that's a major part of fantasy, and just bragging about your cool weapon, like, that is a major part of being a fantasy character. And I'm glad that that is now much more interesting than it used to be.
It would be really cool if they open this up to like a weapon mod system where you can add attributes to your weapon as opposed to just swapping it out entirely. Like, what if you got a polearm or a quarterstaff and you wanted it to have the cleave property, so you took it to the blacksmith and you paid, instead of adding flaming, you add, you know, a really cool blade to the end of it, and now my quarterstaff has cleave.
No, Param, stop stealing my secret project's ideas.
Oh, I forgot that was part of your secret. Never mind. Forget I said anything about that.
Nobody knows anything about what you're talking about. Moving on.
But on to other cool things. You mentioned +1 weapons, and we got one heck of a surprise last night when they finally told us what a +1 weapon did. When Jason Bowman hit one of the members of the Game Trade magazine in a live play they were doing from Gamma with a +1 mace, and found out that that meant it did 2d8 damage instead of 1d8 damage. And my first instinct reaction was that was one heck of a +1.
Yeah, that player who got hit thought it was one heck of a +1 too. I think it was 15 damage total at like a level 2 character,
which is different from a first edition character getting hit for 15 points, because you get like basically twice as many hit points at first level. But still, that's a lot of damage, and it does sound like that has to be rarer just by balance necessity, which is great for me because I am in the magic items should be rare camp.
I mean, at least in 2E, they got hit for 15 damage and they were calling for the healer. In 1E, you'd be calling for the mortician.
Right.
Someone stabilized.
Healer! Don't bother, that guy's already dead.
Oh. Oh, man. So I guess there's not much to talk about with that, but it does sort of, like, in the 3E era, the math for how weapons were upgraded was pretty standard. You got your +1 because you had to, and then you added an elemental damage dice because that was mathematically the best way to get damage on your weapon. And then some people would even add more than one elemental damage dice until you had the flaming acid sword of shockiness. And just to get as much damage out there as possible, you just ended up avoiding the +1 path. And then, like, good grief, even the weapons they gave away, it was a rarity to see +2 on anything. It was always +1 keen, critical striking, fire, flaming, toenail trimming, sword of greatness.
I do hope that they move away from calling these weapons +1 weapons. Like, I hope it's called +1 in the playtest for familiarity, and then by second edition it has just a name, because to a character who owns a +1 weapon, he has no idea what that +1 means. It has no in-world definition.
Well, I think maybe it's supposed to be an enchanted sword, and that's all it's supposed to be, but I get your meaning here.
Well, don't the pluses go off of, like, weren't you saying they go off of, like, masterwork and stuff?
Yes, but as far as whatever these additional damage dice are going to be called. Because they did solve that for masterwork. It's expert, master, and I'm going to say glorious, even though I'm pretty sure it's wrong, because it should be called glorious.
Glorious! That was a glorious kill with my glorious
mace.
Now, the other thing we did discover very shortly after the +1 mace was introduced is how the death and dying rules are going to work.
I'm not current on this. Please explain it to me.
Okay, so we know this because the Game Trade magazine people were doing fairly badly. And Jason Bowman was rolling nothing but 20s, and they were rolling nothing but 4. And so what happens is when you get hit and knocked out from damage, you don't go to negative hit points. You just go to 0 and you're down, and you're at a state called dying. And dying has 3 states, and the 4th is your toast, or is it 4 states and the 5th is your toast? I might be wrong on that. So there's dying 1, dying 2, dying 3, and dead, or it might be dying 4, dying 5 is dead. And that dying track, you make fortitude saves to move up it, and if you fail the fortitude saves, you go down it. I can't pronounce the name. It says that it's 4 dead. T.S. Rodriguez? Okay. 4th is your toast. Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3 toast. But how it works with the crit system is if the hit that knocked you out was a crit, you automatically go down to dying 2. And if you crit fail the save, you slip 2 points down. So it puts a lot more drama on those moments. Whereas in Pathfinder, negative hit points at low levels weren't that bad because most things didn't deal enough damage to push you all the way through your con. And then at high levels, Rocket Tag meant that everything did. So you got hit and you're dead. This at least more evens out that experience. But the Starfinder system, I find, almost makes characters invincible. so that they never really have to worry about death, unless they're at one of my SFS tables, in which case I seem to kill a whole bunch of them. But the roll itself seems almost trivial because somebody's going to get up to them with a heal spell or something like that. And I think that this way it puts a lot more drama on that rolling for death.
That's probably fair.
I'd like to talk about reactions for a bit.
What's your reaction on reactions?
So this isn't from first-hand experience. This is from things I'd heard about 4th edition, but that reactions really bogged down the play. Because immediate actions were a much bigger thing in 4th edition than they were in 3.5 and then Pathfinder 1st edition. The idea that you couldn't get through a round just doing the thing you wanted to do. Not only did you have to succeed at a roll, but somebody probably had a counter to it. Now, from what we've heard, Pathfinder 2nd edition reactions are going to be very specific, and they're going to be more they're going to play out more like readied actions do right now, where it's got to have a specific trigger. But my concern is that people will see this as a design space that they really can play with, and we're going to see a whole bunch of things that are reaction-based, and it will bog down the ebb and flow of how combat is supposed to work.
It sounds like Starfinder's reaction system to me, which is you get one, enjoy. Mm-hmm. I am not anticipating it to bog down play, but I guess if they change the rules, it's possible.
I didn't realize Starfinder had a reaction system.
Mm-hmm.
It's
basically... go ahead.
It's not as robust as they seem to be proposing for Pathfinder 2, but it's obviously from the similar route.
Mm-hmm. You basically get one, and in Starfinder there are only 3 things that can provoke. Like as a default, the only reaction that all characters have is attack of opportunity, and there's only 3 things that can provoke an attack of opportunity. It's moving out of a threatened square, firing a ranged weapon, or casting a spell, or a spell-like ability. But yeah, same thing. And so, really, reactions don't come up very often in Starfinder, in my experience, unless you have an ability that gives you something else to do with the reaction.
Now I've played.
Okay, you know what? Comparing it to attacks of opportunity puts me at ease, because that is a very controlled system that never really got out of control, even as it got built on as a mechanical, avenue.
Indeed.
Now I did play a lot of 4th edition. I played several campaigns from 1 to max level through 4th edition when it was out. So I know about the bogging down and the reactions and how that bad it could be, but I find that what happened was a side effect that was so much better, is that everybody was always paying attention to everybody's action, because you needed to pay attention to know, oh, is one of my reactions available right now? Can I do something important right now? So it kept everyone engaged. So I will trade a little bit of bog down, especially since we're getting rid of so much that bogs down combat right now, like the iterative attack system, and the fact that attacks of opportunity is going to be a rarity, not a guarantee for everybody, so that my players are paying attention and engaged in every instance of the combat, and not just waiting for their turn passively in a coma.
You know what? I withdraw all of my concerns about reactions. You've both convinced me.
We did it.
I doubt that I have as much to worry about now.
I'm glad we were able to put your mind at ease, Ryan.
For now.
For now. So what do you guys think? Do you have any other things that you are either concerned about or excited for in 2nd edition?
I mean, we can go into monster creation. I have a series of rants there.
Oh. Okay.
I mean, I figured that Logan was designing it. It was probably going to be like the Starfinder one.
Did Logan design the Starfinder one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He also did the prototype, which is the Unchained version. So, like,
I was
going to
say, how different is Starfinder from Unchained?
It is the Unchained
almost
rules.
exactly the same.
Yeah, but there seemed to be a key difference in the way the math is handled. In Starfinder, the math is intentionally unbalanced, so that the assumptions for stats for NPCs and monsters are not the same assumptions for stats for the party members, for reasons they've explained in depth. Party members tend to have higher AC than monsters have, and monsters tend to have higher attacks than party members have. So that in Starfinder, so that in play it's a moot point, but it means that when players attack other players due to very many mind control abilities that are in Starfinder, or what reasons you would do that, players are more survivable. They don't kill each other, whereas in Pathfinder, when the barbarian gets mind controlled, it usually means you've lost your cleric. And when monsters get taken over, they just slaughter each other because it's satisfying for a player that does that to get to experience that. And what they've already said about the Pathfinder 2 version is that's not the case, that everything is based off the same math scale, so that a character created using the PC rules will have the same range of stats as one using the monster rules.
I like that. That alleviates some of the concerns I actually have with the Starfinder one. One of the things that happened to us in Dead Suns, without giving spoilers, we fought a thing that was CR +3 compared to us, and and it turns out in Starfinder that's not it's not an encounter that's easy. It's a very, very, very difficult encounter. It was to the point where James was like, I had to not full attack you guys with this monster, because if I did, I would have still hit you with both attacks on a 10.
Yeah. So
I'm cool with that. That was rough. Mm-hmm. That was not a very fun encounter.
In Starfinder, in Pathfinder, a +3 monster is just a relatively difficult boss, and a +4 monster is a game ender boss, like, a book ender. In
Depending on the level.
Right. Well, yeah, early levels you don't want to do that, but mid levels and higher. In Starfinder, the math is so tight that going +3 levels is basically an epic boss. And you don't want to do that to your players unless you want to kill a couple of them.
Yeah.
Just based on what CR is supposed to mean, that makes sense. Like, my expectation would be that if you're going that far above their level, then that should +3 should be when it gets out of the range.
This is when my epic math rant happens. I think I've done it on the thing. The reason CR works the way it does in Pathfinder is because an equal level CR is a trivial encounter. And the reason it needs to be a trivial encounter is okay, so this is how the math rant works. When you tell me how often a standard fight should be successful for the PCs, a lot of people tell me 50-50. Because, people think that that's fair. Well, that means your characters never hit second level. And then people say, well, 25% or 10% or whatever that is. Like, what's the chance of failure? 10%? Well, then they never see third. And then, well, what does it need to be? It needs to be less than 0.25% for even half of your party to see 20. And basically the rant basically goes that if you have any percent of failure that isn't trivial, then the math of the game, so many encounters chained upon end means that just the way probability works, the players are eventually going to hit that failure point and die. So the CRs are trivial, and then you crank them up for a boss so that they actually matter, and you crank them back down to trivial so that everybody's having fun. And that's how the Pathfinder math works, because if you made the fights of equal CR hard, then that means that nobody wins at the campaign. Every campaign ends in a TPK at level 5 or some nonsense.
Okay, but I'm just saying +3 feels like that's beyond when it should be. It should be equal CR is that, +1 should be harder, and +2 should be when you're getting to the upper limit. +3 feels like then there's a flaw in the system.
Yeah, I guess it just matters of where you want to put that range at, where you're comfortable putting that range at. But the wider the range, the more monsters you have available at any given time, and that's one thing that the Starfinder system has wrong with it right now, is that there's so few available monster stat blocks that and the range is so tight that it's having the situation where the same monsters are what everybody has to face in the printed material because they're the only few that are available for that particular range, so they have to get repeated. Thankfully, the simple monster creation rules means that it is trivial for a GM to restat a monster or get a new monster on the field. I statted one in the middle of play for my home game. I created an entire monster with very complex abilities in the, hey guys, I need a 5-minute break segment of the game.
Which I can totally do with the everything's interconnected rules just by using the chart in the back of the bestiary. which is something I was even thinking of doing a seminar on at PaizoCon, but now that 1E's going to be, I'm not going to say retired, but it's not going to be the main focus of Paizo. I don't think that that's worth my time at a PaizoCon anymore. So anyway, as you know, I prefer the everything is interconnected, everything makes sense. And that way, if somebody does anything unexpected, you can reverse engineer it to make it sure it works. The problem with that system in first edition is that it's only about 80% that. And that's what makes character creation or monster creation so hard, because even if you listen to some of the Sean K. Reynolds advice on making monster seminars that we've recorded over the years, back when Sean was on the design team, he would say things like, well, if you want your monster to have more damage with his natural attacks, don't take improved natural attack, just give him that better thing. And then people that are creating monsters have this pit that they fall in when they're trying to find appropriate feats for your character, even though there's this collection of feats that are supposed to be appropriate for the character that he's just saying to arbitrarily do, even though it's a system that's not supposed to have arbitrary choices. The other problem with the monster creation rules in first edition is low levels. Because if you look at that chart that I love, it says that the average AC for a first level, for a CR1 creature should be 12 or 13. I believe it's 13. And then if you look at all the CR1 creatures in the book, they have ACs like 15 to 17, which at first level is a major gap. And it's the reason that so many first level combats are just tedious, is because everyone has much higher AC than the math says they should have. And the reason that happens is the assumption is that at low levels you should be fighting small creatures. But small creatures have two things working in their favor. One being small, they have an AC bonus. Two being small, they have a dex bonus, which gives them an AC bonus. And that's why first level Pathfinder first edition encounters all play out like you're swatting flies, or swatting mosquitoes, I guess, because you've got all these guys that are really hard to hit, because logically they should be really hard to hit, but mathematically and challenge rating wise, it's just obnoxious. And so that's why I prefer having an encounter with a horse at first level over a bunch of goblins, because the horse is actually balanced to the system. Even though the horse is larger, can do more damage, it's the kind of creature they should be facing based on the math. So I need a second edition Pathfinder character creation rules to acknowledge that if you're going to be facing a lot of small guys at first level, their AC somehow has to be in the range that you're going to be hitting fairly reasonably, so that you don't have these 10-round encounters when your spells only last a round or two, at least based on the 1E model, and where it's just every player has so few options that you just roll, I hit, I miss, you move on, round after round after round.
Well, it's in Starfinder, in Starfinder you just pull the number off of a table. Like there's no calculating, there's no size bonus, there's no dex modifier.
Henry, but Ryan, you're saying you're using the back stats in the bestiary to build your monsters with, right?
No, if I need to improvise a monster, then I just open that chart and it's like, there's his stats. Now I just come up with a couple of cool attacks. So you've just described
how the monster creation rules work.
Except I can reverse engineer those.
But you said but you can't, because those numbers are the target ranges, and the actual game doesn't reverse engineer into those target ranges because of exactly what you said. The small monsters, because they're small, are built with basic equipment that equals high ACs. If you were to actually build these characters out, you're almost universally going to end up with high ACs, even if they weren't small, because that's only 1 AC. That's not explaining the 4 AC difference that you're complaining about.
Oh, yeah. That's the leather armor they can afford but shouldn't be able to according to the system.
Right. Because when you build these things out of the if you build these things out of the actual NPC rules, or you're building them out of the monster creation rules the long way, you're basically trying to hit targets by adjusting your choices that you're making through the build-up, whereas when you're actually building up, the range of possible results are huge. And then you end up with these, and also they're not under your control, because you're buying feats because you have to have 5 feats. You're using this chart that tells you where your BABs are going to be in stats because you decided it was going to be a dragon. So that means it's automatically going to do all these things, despite the fact that you wanted to make a tiny little sewer dragon monster that has a completely different goal, but because he has to be dragon, that means he comes with all this baggage that is going to change your math. And then you're adjusting which feats, you're adjusting their stats, you're basically you're firing catapults instead of sniper rifles. You're taking the shot, see where it lands, then have to rebuild it to adjust and pull it back to take the shot and hope you're hitting your target. Whereas with the simple monster creation system, or using the improv rules in the backs of the bestiary, you know the target and you're hitting it every time.
Yes, but I think the juice is worth the squeeze in that case. Doing the labor of the character of the monster design is worth it to have something that, no matter what a player throws at it, the system is made to balance it. For the second edition, any time that's saved in monster creation because of the new system, I need at least half of that to be committed to editing and developing that monster to make sure that all of those unforeseen circumstances that the firstie system is built to accommodate, that it factors them in, and that there's nothing like in early Starfinder Society scenarios where there were typos that made monsters unplayable. Which, well, luckily, you've explained, Alien Archive advanced that.
Louise is in chat, so maybe he can develop those monsters for you.
Louise, make sure you develop the monsters properly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to advocate for, no, guys, don't worry about the typos or spending time developing these things. Just wing it. Of course they need to make sure that they do a good job in the post-production and actually making the book a book and playable game. I think
but my advice isn't exclusive to publishers. If you as a GM are like, oh, I could just throw together a monster in 10 minutes instead of an hour, no, spend half an hour. Make sure you go over what you've written to make sure that it works.
Okay, here's what I'm going to say to you.
This sounds like you guys should write a blog about this.
Assuming that I'm competent. Assuming that I'm competent at my system and you're competent at your system, and neither of our players know which of us did it. If we were to GM the same freaking scenario and run the players through it, and they fought my monster and they fought your monster, they would never be able to tell which one was built which way.
Depends on how well it plays.
Well, assuming they play correctly, they're going to have all the right stats.
Moving on to the next question. Woo! Or next topic.
Well, what is the next topic? I guess the other big thing that everybody's concerned about is all my useless 1E material books. I spent a fortune on 1E.
Oh, gosh.
What does that mean?
I bought a new bookshelf for them, Ryan. They have a home. And it's...
There are few people on this planet who has spent as much on Pathfinder as me. I am not so much worried about the value of my previous edition books, because I have done the edition tango dozens of times now. I've gone from 2nd edition to 3rd edition, 3rd edition to 4th edition, and then back again. 5th edition exists. I didn't go with it, but it's a thing that exists. And so going from Pathfinder to Pathfinder 2 is old hat for me. I know that most of my campaign setting books are still going to be almost as valuable as they've always been, because that is world and fluff and settings. I know that the adventures were going to require some work, but they are also very valuable because they're storyline and maps and all kinds of goodness that would still take me a lot of time. And thanks to simple monster creation rules, it's not going to be too bad to restat those things. Now, I do mourn the loss of my class options, because those are things that I can't use, and I'm going to need to either convert or do a lot of house ruling, or just hoping that Paizo gets there. It's going to be some very brief opportunity for third parties to jump on some easy early sales that will then become irrelevant when Paizo finally does release the thing. But that's a dance you all have done before. And so I sort of know how this is done. I mean, it's not just you, but like every other... when 4th edition came out, a lot of books came out that were just retranslating the stuff that didn't make it over from 3rd edition, and then those books quickly became worthless when 4th edition actually released that content, like sorcerers and gnomes. As long as the new books are good and I like the game, the loss of the stats and the player options I won't have access to for a little while, especially since it's just basically going to be wait until their equivalents do exist, because that's what's happened every single time that these editions changes have happened, is usually not as bad, especially since a lot of my books, especially since Paizo specifically puts so much of their fluff in their books, except for the. What's wrong with calling it fluff? We've called it fluff
implies
for decades.
that it has no value.
Okay,
Fluff implies it has no value.
And Alex, need I remind you the mechanism versus mechanic argument?
So the thing is that mechanics is literally in the rule book, Ryan. I actually found it in the class chapter on the page where they describe the classes.
Let's not get into that.
Said, because the difference is that mechanics and mechanisms, they don't insult the people who wrote the content. When you call something fluff, you're telling the author that their thing is inconsequential. It's fluff, it's padding, it's just taking up space. You should use flavor because that implies that it adds value to the product. Just like how flavor adds value to the food you're eating.
I'll try to readjust my language for respect for the creators, but I've always preferred the flavor part of the books anyway. And
well, I'm sure there are people who preferred races, but that's not a great terminology either.
I didn't.
Boom. It's okay.
Far beyond equivalent.
A little beyond. I don't think it's as far as you think it is.
Now, because so much of the flavor and the campaign setting and the storyline is what Pathfinder focused on, except for their crunch books, which is also an insulting term.
Whoa. No, it's not.
Yeah, I don't think crunch is insulting.
But the reason so many foods are named after the feeling of eating them, like crackers, is because the mouth experience is a major part of it. Mouth experience is as important as flavor. So the crunch flavor equivalent actually does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's an important textural aspect of the food.
Oh, now I'm going back to
which is a weird conversation I didn't expect us to have, but woo! There it is.
You could also use zest if you want instead of flavored. Zest.
I'm not using
But like all the Paizo people use flavor, and they don't use fluff, if you ever read their posts.
I'm very aware that they don't use fluff. I've been corrected more than once. Now, back to the point at hand. Because they have so much of their flavor focus in their books, I think that their books, more than the 3rd edition books, hold value. For the same reason that 2nd edition books held a lot more value than the 3rd edition equivalents. Because 3rd edition focused so much on crunch that I actually still use 2nd edition books to this day. Going back for adventures and locations and cities and the Volo's guides and all of those types of books, whereas I barely touch a 3rd edition book anymore.
So I am going to validate a little bit of the argument that, people don't want to get rid of their bookshelf just because Pathfinder was built on reverse compatibility, and so the starting audience, I don't even want to say the core audience, but the foundational audience for Pathfinder were the people that were concerned about their bookshelf being invalidated and were told that, no, with this edition you continue to use it. Some people misinterpreted that as saying there will never be a 2nd edition. That's wrong. It was just, you're going to get more life out of this, and we're going to be able to continue to provide new options to this, which they did for, by the time 2nd edition comes out, an additional 10 years. So I think that anyone that's worried about their 1st edition books not being not getting the money worth for the majority of their 1st edition books, no, you will have gotten more out of this than any other edition. The 3.5 / Pathfinder legacy will be intact as the longest reigning single supported edition of any fantasy RPG. Well, basically of any edition of Dungeons & Dragons.
Or any RPG, honestly. I mean,
yeah.
Anything come to the amount of printed material?
Palladium?
No, their books are the same, but they've been printing the same books for 20 years.
I was readying that answer before you added amount of printed material.
I
was talking about
Mona.
time-wise, Palladium has probably the record. But what Paizo is doing as far as continuing to support 1st edition is impressive, because whereas when 3rd edition went to 4th edition, 3rd edition books got discontinued. There were no legally available PDFs of these products, whereas Paizo has said that, like Eric Mona in the last episode said, 1st edition books will remain in print. That's huge. So don't rush out to buy books if you're worried about your budget, because you will still have years to buy them. Plus, we aren't getting another year of books that are not going to be valid within another year. We're only getting the Player in a Handbook. That is the last hardcover we're going to get. I really wish they could squeeze out an NPC Codex too. That's probably the only book that I really wish they could squeeze out.
That's a topic.
But I understand why they wouldn't.
I want to hit which books do we wish we would have gotten to wrap this up. But I didn't mean to stop you.
That's fine. Actually, what I was going to say probably fits better when we get to news, too. So that's fine.
Okay. I'm ready to talk about that now then, Param. So what books do you wish they could have still hit?
I really wish we would have gotten a dungeoneering book about caves and dungeons and traps, and like that's a big part of the game, and they and it seems like they avoided that sort of book on purpose, because they even talked about how they didn't make it in some of the promotions for Pathfinder 2e. But I think that that's such an important part of the game that having some sort of focus on it would have been great. It would have fit really well with the last few books they were releasing, which were the Ultimate Intrigue and Horror Adventures and Occult Adventures, where it was all about a style of play, and Wilderness, Ultimate Wilderness, that was, it almost seemed to ready-made to, well, dungeon crawling is a style of play, let's make a book that supports it. I wish we would have gotten a book like that, because I would love to see what the creative minds of Paizo could do to our 10-foot rooms.
A book I was expecting, but now would not expect them to put out with Pathfinder 2nd Edition coming out, was more Unchained. Another Unchained book. It felt like they really... the first Unchained, I think, is a great book, and not all of those subsystems could be integrated as easily as others, but it was definitely, here's material that absolutely any group could use, and here is existing material that doesn't work for everybody, or just plain old doesn't work. Here's a better way of doing it. And there's a lot of the stuff that Eric was complaining about as specific things he wished they could fix. Potentially you could fix in first edition with another Unchained. Going with second edition is another way of doing it, and the fact that they're changing the action, the way actions work, justifies it as more than just another Unchained book. This is a whole other edition. So it's actually probably one of the reasons that I am so much more willing to accept the second edition Pathfinder than I was the fourth edition of Dungeons & Dragons. One is that the changes they're proposing, they're actually giving me examples, and I like them. And two is that when I'm already thinking about we should have an Unchained to fix some more problems with first edition, shows that I was already considering what a cleaner edition of Pathfinder would be.
Well, to go to your point even further, almost all of the changes that they're talking about for PF2, there is a direct analog, a very close direct analog in Unchained. Like the action economy was in Unchained. The simple monster rules were in Unchained. A lot of what they're talking about came from that book.
Yeah, so then other than that, what's that book that I kept predicting? Like an Ultimate War?
Yeah. I wanted a High Seas book, especially after Starfinder, because I still think you could make the naval rules based off the starship rules and make a very fun naval adventures.
Yeah, but there's nothing about that, like about your idea or about a war book, that had to be a first edition book. If that's something that we eventually get in second edition, all for it. There's nothing really for first edition now that I absolutely think is like a box that went unchecked.
What about you, Alex?
I think mine's cheating because it's still something we could get with Pathfinder 2. I'm surprised we never got more information about any of the other continents in the campaign setting.
Yeah.
I feel like there's this apprehension because they did the year of the Jade Regent where everything was tied to Tian Sha, and like the core rulebook had all the Eastern classes. We had the Tian Sha Adventure Path. We had the campaign setting guide. We had the primer. But like really, when you get down to it, that's some content in a core rulebook like player options, 6 adventure path volumes, 1 campaign setting guide, and 1 player companion. That's really not a whole lot of info on Tian Sha. And since then, we have not got significant information about Tian Sha or any other area pretty much anywhere. There's like a write-up of the Samsaran Nation in Occult Realms, which is very easy to miss if you don't know it's there. Then there's also like a couple of port cities from Distant Shores that are in different continents. And I don't know if you've read Distant Shores. The way that the city that is in Arcadia is painted makes it seem like essentially the Native American Wakanda. And I want it so bad. And like, just, I want more out of the Inner Sea, because pretty much every place in the Inner Sea has at least, a couple pages on it at this point. We've got the guide, and I was really hoping we'd get some information about more places out there. I think Tian Sha has this issue where many of the nations in Tian Sha just feel like areas in the Inner Sea region, but with a twist. Like how Tianjin is essentially the World Wound, but Quipoleth and the Angels one. Like, there's a lot of places like that, and I would love more information on them. And I'm kind of surprised we didn't get it in Pathfinder First Edition, but hey, Eric Mona said that they weren't interested in rehashing old books for the new edition, so maybe we'll get some more continent stuff.
Well, and the Pathfinder player companion and campaign setting lines are continuing, even though the campaign setting is getting integrated into the RPG line. So I expect we're going to get a lot of campaign setting content coming forward. Like, if there's anything you're still looking for in the world, there is still a very good chance that we get it.
Well, they were very quick to come out and say that the Plains book coming out was going to be heavily campaign setting based, so, and not super crunch based, so that it would still have some value for people buying it for PF2 instead of. I think that they're going to have to lean into their setting, because I'm a collector. I'm going to buy everything, but not everybody's a collector, and I don't suggest everybody be a collector. A legitimate thing right now, a legitimate opinion, if you are intending to switch to PF2, to just stop buying PF1 material now is a rational choice.
Yeah, it's got to need a lot of setting information in order to get people to stay. I think in retrospect, it makes sense why they moved Player Companion to bi-monthly for that reason. Because Player Companion has always been more crunchy than the campaign setting line. And if you can cut the number of those products in half, you reduce the impact of people dropping the line, if that is what happens.
And actually, you're saying it's always been, but when it was just the companion line and they were playtesting the beta rules for the first edition, there was virtually no crunch in either the campaign setting or the companion the player companion line. And in fact, it was like a shock to me when I picked up a player companion book after the Pathfinder core rulebook came out, and it was full of crunch, because it was just not what I'd come to expect from that line. And I expect the next 2 years to be a return to those playtesting era books.
Yeah. And the player companion line wasn't always monthly. It was bi-monthly with the campaign setting line for the first 3 or 4 years of Pathfinder, and then it became monthly when Pathfinder peaked in popularity.
Interesting.
Finally, before we move on to the news, let's just talk about how second edition affects the No Direction network. So people know that No Direction was founded as 3.5 Private Sanctuary, which was the network dedicated to, no, we're not changing the editions. Which it ended up, we weren't the only one that did that. Not only, like, I thought we were going to be servicing a small but like stubborn group of gamers that just still preferred 3.5 to 4th edition. It ends up that was the majority of gamers, and Pathfinder outsold Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, which is still absurd. And actually something we're going to touch on in the news section. So the question has become, then, are we going to be the 1st edition Pathfinder network? And honestly, at this point, it is too early to say. I doubt it. What's more likely now, because again, when 3.5 Private Sanctuary launched as a site, it was me. It was me writing all of the content, and then me and my co-host Jay, not this Jay, a different Jay, co-hosting a podcast. But it was a 2-person operation, mostly a 1-person operation. So it was basically my whims dictated the content of the network. Now that it's a network, even if for whatever reason I say I'm not changing to 2nd edition, I'm not going to make no one else change to 2nd edition. I could just then become the guy who has once a week a blog post about what's still great about 1st edition. That is still a possibility. If I'm not that guy, but someone out there is, I would be more than happy to talk to them about potentially coming on board when second edition does come out. But for now, I believe most of our content is just going to be about second edition news as it comes out, which, for all we know, it's going to continue to come out at a pace comparable to what is coming out now, probably slowed down after maybe a month. It's going to continue to come out like that. We're going to continue to have things to react to. And it's just going to be an interesting ride for the next, let's say, 6 months before the playtest book comes out. And then that'll probably be another shift in our content.
Well, not to mention we're about to have the seminars, and a lot of those are going to have to be based on 2E.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yes. I didn't even think of that. But yeah, that's in like 70 days. I don't know. If Darren Caldemeyer, if you're in chat, let me know how many days it is before PaizoCon.
Currently, I mean, as a freelancer, I'd like to write for second edition when Paizo puts it out and starts taking freelancers for projects. So I'm hoping to get in on, that sort of thing. As for Everyman Gaming, at the moment, my gut says definitely support second edition because it is going to be the new hotness, and therefore it will help keep the lights on for Everyman Gaming, which is important when you're a publishing company. However, if I have customers who say I still want first edition Pathfinder stuff, then I would be a fool not to service those people too, because it's a system I am already quite adept at. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully there will be something else that I can do for Everyman Gaming that I want to talk about later. Not in this show, but like later in the future. Mm-hmm. But, part of being in business is recognizing opportunities and understanding that things are going to change, and either you change with them or you die.
Mm-hmm. And Pathfinder
How about iconic design, Dees?
Oh, iconic design. Probably going to do... So right now I switch back and forth between Starfinder and first edition as my whims have it. And one of the problems I'm having with Starfinder is that since the content rate of new stuff is kind of slow, it's tough to come up with a whole bunch of different builds. So I kind of just do mostly Pathfinder. I feel like when second edition comes out, I'll definitely be doing a lot of 2E stuff, at least at the beginning, like I did for Starfinder. And then I'll see what people react to and figure it out from there. I have a feeling, though, my gut says that Pathfinder second edition is going to be what people want to see. Like, I didn't really get that feeling from the Starfinder stuff, but from the Pathfinder stuff, that's like Paizo's ship. I have a feeling. Yeah. And I think it's going to go 2E, but I'm not sure yet.
And Pathfinder itself is proof that if a large enough community decides to not migrate and put some effort behind it, then there is room for publishers to service an audience. I mean, if people want something, somebody's going to offer it to them and take money for it.
So one change that will be happening at the network is that keyword design for now is going in the cooler. It may be retired until second edition or until the playtest comes out. Like we were saying, it's just my interest, and I think the audience interest in first D and new 1E material is down. And so for next week, when I'm supposed to have a new article, we may have a new blog. This is something that we are discussing. Actually, coincidentally, there were some changes coming to the network around this time anyway, and now it just feels like a good time to be initiating a lot of those changes. So expect updates and news about things that are going to be changing about the network beyond just what we're covering in probably the next month or so. But yeah, so keyword design is being retired, but I will continue to do behind the screens because that's GM advice, and that applies universally. And funny enough, I was writing a GM advice, or sorry, behind the screens about having just sold my 3.5 books when news of second edition Pathfinder came out. And so it was definitely, there was two feelings. One was, well, do I just sell all my first edition books now, or at least make plans? But then the second one was like, people are just going to think I'm shilling. Because, man, I was making, like, it was a really clever analogy of, like, this is encumbering you, which is not even going to be a rule in second edition. But it's like, if you've got these books and they are taking up your shelf slot and you are not using them, it is just encumbrance on you as a GM. So free yourself of that extra weight. I swear that I was writing this article before I found out that a new edition of Pathfinder was coming. This article is going up tomorrow. I don't know if I'm updating it or just adding a line at the beginning saying, like, this does not necessarily reflect my feelings about second edition. This was just a cool article I wrote. It's a coincidence. I'm sorry.
What we need to do is we need to convert you over to a Starfinder fan so you can make key card design.
What? Oh, why? What's key? Oh, okay. Key card design. All right. That's like keys.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That joke would have landed if I was a Starfinder fan.
That's okay. I don't have a high.
The Starfinder fans in the audience are laughing with you and at me right now.
Probably.
All right.
But Param, any change from the network as far as what you're going to be covering? Like, this doesn't affect No Direction to Beyond. This doesn't affect No Direction that much.
There's some changes coming, but they had nothing to do with this. I will say, no, I intend to very exuberantly cover second edition news. Our audience stat says that that's a good idea. I will continue to collect. I don't see that that's going to change all that much about the network. I'll just keep producing the material I'm producing. I don't write a blog though, so I'm on all the video stuff, and I will happily talking head about whatever.
Mina asks if we will cover the classes of second edition. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess with No Direction Beyond, we've sort of let it sort of become the hybrid child of 3.5 Private Sanctuary, what it became, and No Direction Prime, what it is. I think maybe we might want to let No Direction grow a little bit to cover that aspect too, since there isn't a 3.5 Private Sanctuary to do the crunchy focus bits. And there's going to be a content drought, especially after the core rulebook. Anthony. That first year of content, we're experiencing it in Starfinder, while we're waiting for the new crunchy books to come out. That drought of content needs some filler, so some nice crunchy strategy episodes might be something we want to do, but that'll be a network discussion. And if you want to see crunchy class focused stuff on No Direction, let us know.
We do have some news items, but we are running a little long. I believe everything in the news we can cover in pretty much just rapid succession. So instead of transitioning to a news segment, all right. So more 2E playtests have been posted. We've got the Glass Cannon podcast playtest part 3 and 4 are up. We already referenced them, and there are places that have collected what went on in that, what new rules we've discovered, some of which we discussed in the earlier segment. But if we're waiting for parts 3 and 4, they are now available on the Glass Cannon podcast website, glasscannonpodcast.com/the Pathfinder playtest parts 3 and 4. And official commentary from Paizo has been posted to the Paizo blog about the rules that came out in the Glass Cannon podcast, the parts 1 and 2. So in addition to Reddit and various other places where you can find people that have been systematically analyzing just instances of new rules being talked about, now Paizo has also thrown their hat into that ring. And finally, as Per mentioned, there was a GTM playtest live from Gamma, again run by Jason Bullman. So there's some more rules that we learned from that. And hey, if you like actual play stuff, and Jason Bullman is an entertaining animated GM, also worth checking out.
Indeed.
Speaking of Gamma, there were some slideshows that showed some additional slideshows run by Eric Mona about product. And so we've got some additional information about upcoming Starfinder and Pathfinder 2nd edition books. A lot of this stuff is just reflective of what's on the product pages, although some of the Starfinder stuff is new information to my knowledge. But I believe this is something that you will go into more on the next Pathfinder Beyond.
Maybe. I think we were talking about doing a Pack Worlds thing next. We'll see what ends up happening.
Okay. ICV2 has their fall 2017 rankings. Man, it felt like it's been forever since an ICV2 had their rankings of the top-selling role-playing games. But this one finally came out covering the fall 2017 time period. And one thing we weren't sure is whether they were going to consider Starfinder a separate game from Pathfinder. In fact, they have. And according to their list, number 1 selling RPG right now is Dungeons & Dragons, followed by Starfinder, followed by Pathfinder. These are the same rankings. Anytime we say that Pathfinder was outselling Dungeons & Dragons, ICV2 is the only people that are, tabulating this information, which is based on interviews with retailers, distributors, and manufacturers. So I know some people are questioning whether we should even be considering this because it's based on interviews, but it is a pretty, like, it's across multiple industries. This is the standard for gaining this information. And if we were willing to say Pathfinder is number one based on ICB2's methodology, then I am fine saying that Starfinder is number two to Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons outsold Starfinder based on the same methodology. Mm-hmm. It's not our place to cherry pick when the information is suitable to our needs.
5th edition is just such a phenomenally well done product and selling crazy. It's really easy to see why it is doing as well as it's doing. And plus all the evidence right now is showing that it's growing the market, not so much eating other people's lunch. So that's also good for the whole market, because eventually people that used to be the status quo. People would play Dungeons and Dragons and then branch off. And only with Pathfinder success did that change. And if we're back to the status quo, I like lots of new potential players to branch off so that the other games can get their love. Also, it does line up with our internal metrics with how our shows were doing, especially post the excitement of Starfinder. No Direction Beyond was outperforming normal episodes of No Direction up until recently. Not just until PE2. It tapered off a bit, and since the Eric Mona interview and then the Crystal interview, No Direction kind of became number one to Beyond's number two slot. But so that just lines up with what I expected to see.
And then it all blew up as soon as Pathfinder 2nd Edition happened. Oh, our dominance! No!
We will never
actually
have it again.
Reflecting that, for all we know, Starfinder could be outselling Pathfinder when Pathfinder was number one. It's just that, like you said, the market has expanded. So this is a ranking. It doesn't reflect. It doesn't actually give us the information of how many units are being sold. So even though Starfinder sold more units at Gen Con than any other book that Paizo ever brought, and faster, it could like Dungeons & Dragons is just doing that much better overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said earlier, there's from all the interviews and all the stats we've seen, it looks like the post Stranger Things, post Critical Role, post D&D becoming mainstream world is there's just that many new players. There's just that many new people interested in the hobby, and D&D ate most of them, which makes sense because that's the name they're seeing. The Demigorgon.
It's the brand recognition.
Yeah, and that's what D&D's role has always been in the hobby, except for that very brief time, the few years where Pathfinder overtook 4th edition. And we've talked about that situation ad nauseum, and we've hosted so many Anti-Lisa story hours explaining what happened there that we don't need to go into it. So, yeah, it's just what I expected to see.
Finally, there's been an update to the Pathfinder Society RPG Guild additional resources page. Mm-hmm. You can check it out by going to paizo.com/Pathfinder Society/RPG/additional. In addition to several Pathfinder player companion line books that have been slow to be added, many of them have been added, but the biggest part of the update is that Ultimate Wilderness has now been added to additional resources. So if you see options in Ultimate Wilderness that you'd like to add to your Pathfinder Society character, you can now find out whether it's legal or not.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. I am going to use Eidolon mount on a character. Maybe I'll make it into an iconic design. We'll see.
Can I call out something they announced with PF2's Society that I don't like?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So when Starfinder Society launched, the GM star system was split to where you had Novas and Stars now. And then they're also announcing that with Pathfinder 2, it's going to split again. So there's going to be Pathfinder 2 GM stars and Pathfinder 1 GM stars and Starfinder Novas as a way of keeping your GM rankings. I think that the star system is fundamentally flawed because it is only based on number of games played. There is no test for aptitude at all except for that final 5th star. And I'm not going to name names, but I've met really bad 4 and 5 star GMs, and I've met really amazing 1st star GMs. And I find that the star equivalent doesn't do much to say how good someone is at the rules mastery and running of the games, because doing something bad 100 times doesn't make you good at it.
Yep, true story. It's like portraits in portrait level in Overwatch. Yes, it's cool when you have 5 stars and your level is 99. Ultimately, that is just a measure of the number of hours you have poured into the game.
I would really like for there to be some real GM ranking system that has actual aptitude tests like RPGA had, where the level of your GM meant you actually had to pass a test on hard rules questions in order to earn that badge, and it meant you actually knew what you were doing, not that you just did it a bunch.
Are we ready to wrap things up?
Yep.
Hey, did you guys hear about the post that Eric Mona has going on in the Pathfinder playtest thread?
No.
Yeah, Eric, there is a post where somebody asked about whether or not we could have bigger bestiaries for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And Eric Mona went and made a thread that made a post in it that was like, hey, if you think we should do a really big bestiary, why don't you post here and tell me your thoughts about it? And like the numbers he has thrown around in that thread are like, this would be like a book that would cost $60 to $70 and have an appropriate number of pages. Like, we're talking like not quite Tome of Horrors, but something pretty in that ballpark.
Right, closer to the core rulebook than bestiaries in first
and
edition.
The conversation came up with people saying, like, there's so many important monsters that I use so often from the first 3 bestiaries alone. Like, how am I supposed to wait for these monsters to get printed over 10 years? Because we have 6 bestiaries over 10 years right now. And, you know, that was Eric Mona's reply. So if you have a thought on whether or not you would or wouldn't buy a book that expensive, go to the playtest thread on Paizo, look for the one that says, like, can we have a bigger bestiary? And there's a post from Eric Mona in there, and post your thoughts, because they're watching. Remember, they watch everything we do for these playtests. They want your data. You must give it to them. That now more than ever, your thoughts have an opportunity to directly impact not things that'll happen years in the future, but like literally right around the corner with like the start of this new edition. So if this is something you're interested, check it out. I personally think that I could do one giant book that size, but if subsequent ones were that big, that is close enough to textbook territory that I'm not entirely sure that I would be game for more than one giant book. But hey, if you want to update all of those monsters in one giant book in year 1, I'm down.
What I want more than a big bestiary is a bestiary at launch.
I want both. We can have both, Ryan. We just need to make all of the Pathfinder designers cry.
Oh man, they're already.
If it's between big or at launch, I'm okay with a small or a regular sized bestiary, but at the same time as the core rulebook.
What about
sometimes we at No
bestiary
Direction send
every year?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
If it was an Alien Archive sized one, I'd be cool with that.
Well, that seems to be the Starfinder approach.
Yeah, seriously. But no, like we at No Direction are known for sometimes sending gifts to Paizo, so maybe we'll send them a bottle they can collect the designer tiers in.
Oh my gosh, right? Jeez, Alex. We like the designers. We're usually the champion of the designers.
You're welcome, Stephen and Mark and Logan and Jason.
Well, everyone, thank you for joining us for episode 174 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Thanks for joining us, Alex.
Thank you for having me on short notice.
Before we go, something I wanted to shout out to last time, but we didn't have the time, and I know we're running late this time, but I do want to point out John Brazier Enterprises has a blog, and I really enjoy their content. We've shouted out to a lot of our friends that have blogs, and John Brazier has been something that I've been reading pretty consistently for a long time. Don't think I've ever properly shouted out to it. I really enjoy his series of 5 questions blank class should be able to answer. They are system neutral often. So it's just, if you have got space in your Pathfinder blog reading list, check out John Brazier Enterprises at johnbrazier.com. And Alex, do you have anything you'd like to bring people's attention to?
Not yet. Soon. Soon.
Considering
there's a lot of soon going on today.
Yeah.
Considering
all
that
the soon.
all
the kit soon even.
Considering that we likely have a lot of new listeners, it's more important than ever that I go through this. You will find, if you want to get in contact with us, you can email us at nodirection at hotmail.com. You can also go to our website at nodirectionpodcast.com. You can join our brand new, well, less new anymore, but still awesome and shiny Discord chat, which you can find a link to at nodirectionpodcast.com to join up, where you can join hundreds of other No Direction fans and just chat with us. Most of us are usually there periodically throughout the day, so if you want to chat with us or other fans, it's a great place to get in contact with us. You can also find us at facebook.com/nodirection and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/nodirectionshow.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And I'm Alexander Agunas, the bringer of designer tears.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.
Bye, guys.